So June's astrology is not subtle. I know I already did the astrology for the general astrology for the month of June, but I want to do a separate video now on Jupiter, the Jupiter transiting from Cancer into Leo on June 30th. And just leading up to this whole month feels like this threshold moment collectively and personally where a lot of us are beginning to realize that life just can't continue in the exact same way. And even if you realize it already, very much recognizing where the shifts are starting to happen. And there's a strong feeling of transition, right? Happening underneath everything that's going on, whether it's emotional or psychological, spiritually, financially, for a lot of you, relationally, professionally, whatever it is. Even people, individuals who aren't that tuned into astrology are feeling something shifting. Now, one of the biggest reasons for this is Jupiter's movement from Cancer into Leo, again at the very end of June, which completely changes the energetic atmosphere. It's not happening alone, right? Jupiter in Cancer has been highly emotional. Cancer, because Cancer is ruled by the moon, which is our emotions. Very emotional, very protective, very reflective, very family oriented, deeply connected to healing old emotional foundations, right? But once this Jupiter energy enters Leo, the energy becomes more Leo, Leonine, right? It's very expressive and visible. And here I am, and heart-centered and creative and courageous and very focused on the future. Remember, Leo energy lives in the fifth house, opposite the 11th house of the future. So they're always on the same axis, working with each other. So people begin just generally wanting more from life again, once Jupiter goes into Leo. So much stronger push toward authenticity, leadership, creativity, being more visible, being more confident. Romance is going to take more of a front seat. Those of you who are performers, your ability to perform is going to go to the front of the room. Anything connected to self-expression as well. But Jupiter ingress is not the happening in isolation, right? This is not just about, Jupiter strolling into Leo and nothing else going on. Jupiter entering Leo immediately opposes Pluto retrograde and Juno retrograde in Aquarius, which does mean that growth is coming alongside some deep transformation of relationships and social structures and communities and commitments and identity patterns and power dynamics in our lives. Now, many of us are starting to outgrow old versions of ourselves, and not everyone around us is going to be very comfortable with that evolution. Now, at the same time, Jupiter does remain tied to Mercury retrograde once he goes in, and Hygeia both in Cancer, which means emotional processing. It means healing. It's connected to the nervous system, taking care of your nervous system, family dynamics, communication patterns, and just general like mental overwhelm are definitely major themes here. I say overwhelm because it's Jupiter and Jupiter expands whatever it's close to. So many of us are simultaneously going to be trying to move forward while still healing emotionally from what the past several years have taken out of us, right? It's going to be a lot of us feeling like that. Now, we're also seeing major activation through Uranus, Sedna, and Mars in Gemini when that Jupiter energy moves in. Mars is a quick moving planet, so he's not going to be in there for long. But the energy of when it transitions in is really going to give us the vibe, right, of that experience, especially for the next 6 months. So it's going to be creating rapid mental movement, accelerated communication, sudden changes, overstimulation, right? All these Geminian things. Nervous system activation again, technology, education, transportation, relationships, extended family situation, sibling situation, neighbors, neighborhood, collective exchange of information. That's just on as a general commentary. I'm going to break into each of the rising signs, but I'm just saying you might not even know what your rising sign is. So that's why I like to give this introduction. Now, additionally, the North Node movement into Pisces continues pulling people toward intuition and spirituality and emotional honesty and surrender, but not just surrender, it's got compassion attached to it. And this idea of wanting to feel deeply aligned with our soul, right? But a lot of us are still learning how to trust what we feel instead of constantly being able to tie our outcomes or our happiness to something external to us, or trying to intellectualize the whole process. Now, at the same time, Neptune in Aries is quietly becoming this real focal point when it comes to beginning this next new era, this new spiritual era. A lot of us are going to be redefining ourselves. There's this growing need to just live more real, live more authentically, spiritually, creatively, independently, even if that means dismantling old structures first. And it's for this reason, this is exactly why, guys, the houses, understanding them, where these things are happening, becomes so important. So, going right into a shameless plug, right? Beginning on June 1st, I will officially be releasing my foundational workshop. The Language of the Houses is what it's titled. And this workshop is designed to help you truly understand the framework of astrology itself, not just memorizing meanings, but understanding how the houses function as living areas of experience within the chart. So, I go deeply into the axes. That's how I teach it. I don't teach just house one, two, three, four. I teach house 1 and 7 because they work together. So we go through thoroughly what house 1 means, what house 7 means, and what that axis means combined. And then we go to the next set, 2 and 8, right? Learning the geometry straight out of the gate, right? We go deep into the axis, the angular, succeeding, and cadent dynamics, the psychology of the houses, how the houses speak to one another in real chart interpretation. Now, this is just foundational, which is why I consider this especially important, because this is going to be the foundation workshop for the future workshops that I will be teaching moving forward. So by the end of June, I should have my first live one out. All the workshops moving forward are going to be through Zoom, and it's going to be live. So there will be a Q&A section, and where we're going to be able to engage. But everything builds from the houses. So without understanding them properly, it becomes very difficult to synthesize transits and progressions and relationships between planets, or even timing in any kind of meaningful way, right? Because we have to understand the degrees. So my goal here is really just to help those of you who are interested in learning more about astrology out, as you move beyond the surface level of astrology and begin understanding how charts actually function as an interconnected interconnected system. Now, in addition to the workshop release, I'm also offering a special discount through June on, and I did mention this in my June reading, full birth chart analysis combined with current astrology, which includes a full written report specifically focused, on not only your chart, but on your current energies, right? 30% off of that. For my birthday, because my birthday falls within this period, I'm running a birthday flash special. So when you see this, I'm going to be posting this on either May 27th or May 28th. Um, I'm running a flash special through my birthday, which is June 6th. I'm going to be giving 40% off of my secondary progressions combined with current astrology, just reading, just again through my birthday. This has become my most requested and most popular reading because it goes so far beyond a basic transit reading. Secondary progressions reveal the psychological and emotional evolution happening internally, those deeper shifts shaping your outer reality, and your ability to make decisions, and the processing of those things. And when it's combined with the current astrology, there's just your reading becomes incredibly layered and nuanced and accurate regarding timing and emotional transitions and identity shifts and relationships and career directions and spiritual awakenings, and for some of us, grief cycles, just any sort of major turning point in life, right? Again, progressions show the emotional weather, right, beneath the visible events. And honestly, they often explain why certain transits hit so profoundly for some people and not for others, right? They're one of the most powerful tools in astrology for understanding where you truly are in your life journey, psychologically and spiritually. Okay. So June is not just another month astrologically. It feels like the beginning of a major energetic transition that's going to continue to unfold throughout 2026 and obviously beyond. And the more consciously we understand our charts, our houses, our personal cycles, the timing, the more empowered you become in navigating the changes that are already beginning to unfold. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to go right into starting off with our Aries friends. Let's just go right into Aries. Okay, Aries. So for you guys, Aries rising to a lesser degree, Sun and Moon, this Jupiter ingress into Leo at the end of the month on June 30th is incredibly important because Jupiter is moving into your fifth house. And the fifth house is not a small area of life. Keeping in mind, I do whole house astrology. Okay, so if you're following a different methodology, it's going to be in a different house. Okay. So for a whole house, it's in your fifth house. Um, and that's not a small area of life, it's creativity, it's performance, right? Leo living in the fifth house is Leo's the energy of the entertainer, the person in front of the room, right? So it's very connected to visibility. It's also connected to falling in love, love affairs, romance, and children, and fertility, and passion projects, and entrepreneurship, and being able to express yourself effectively, teaching from the heart and being brave enough, honestly, to be seen, right? To really put yourself out there. And with Jupiter entering Leo at 0 degrees, this begins an entirely new 12-month chapter where your soul is very much trying to reclaim joy and confidence and visibility and authentic self-expression, all those fifth house things, after having been in that heavier Cancer energy in that fourth house cycle. So the fact that Jupiter enters at 0 degrees is pretty significant because 0 degree ingress tends to feel really loud, very raw, very initiating, like, come on, let's go kind of thing. And it feels like standing at the edge of a completely new energetic landscape. So, for you guys specifically, this can feel very much out of all the signs like a creative rebirth for a lot of you. So, there's a strong push towards finally expressing yourself more honestly, more boldly, launching something personal, maybe teaching, performing, creating content. Maybe you're doing that, maybe you're dating. Handling relationships differently, though, right? So it's dating differently, it's connecting differently with people, reconnecting with passion, reclaiming parts of yourself that have become buried under survival mode and hasn't been here in 12 years. So this isn't like one of those things that come around a couple of times a year, right? But this ingress is not simple or lightweight because Jupiter immediately enters in as in positioned in an opposition to Pluto and Juno, both retrograde in Aquarius in your 11th house. And so that axis of the fifth house self-expression versus 11th house social systems, friendships, audience, groups, networks, collective expectations, all of that's going to be very lit up. So this means that Jupiter is trying to expand your individuality and your confidence, while Pluto in Aquarius is simultaneously transforming your social world. So the 11th house is also, what do you plan on doing over the next 10 to 15 years? Your goals and gains. Do you have enough money to retire? Do you have enough money for the future? It's, anything that's very future oriented, really looking at, because the 11th house is a money house, by the way. It is one of the money houses, but it has more to do with like future money, right? And so it's working with the fifth house. Like, do you have enough money? Fifth house children, 11th house future. Do you have enough money for that? Or, whatever it is, enough money to open a business, whatever it is. But it's an opposition. So there's a little bit of strain. So some friendships can feel strained. Certain group dynamics might feel kind of controlling for you or manipulative or draining or just, a little psychologically complex for some of you right now. You may begin realizing that some people around you only supported versions of you that stayed smaller and quieter or more emotionally available to them. And as Jupiter enters Leo, you may start stepping into a bigger space, more of a leadership role, visibility, personal, having this personal authority, right? This agency, right? As I always call it. And not everyone in your network is going to feel super comfortable with that. In fact, because it opposes your fifth house, the person, your kids might not. They'd be like, what the hell is going on with mom or dad? Person in your, that you're in a relationship with, it could certainly happen that way. Even people, if you have your own business, your workers might be like, what's happening, right? Now, the Juno retrograde in there in Aquarius especially suggests reevaluation of commitments involving all of these 11th house things, friendships, collaborators, business partnerships, communities, or even audience relationships, right? If you're a creator of some kind. And you may begin questioning who truly supports your growth versus who unconsciously competes with you, or projects onto you, which can be even more tricky, right? Now, this can absolutely show shifting dynamics around social media, any kind of teaching communities that you're involved in, workshops, memberships, professional organizations, could be with people in any of those areas. Now, at the same time, Jupiter is conjunct Mercury retrograde in Hygeia and Cancer in your fourth house. And this is extremely important because it shows that even while Jupiter is entering in a louder, more expressive fifth house cycle, your emotional and psychological foundation is still undergoing a lot of review and repair. As Mercury retrograde in the fourth suggests deep reflection involving all fourth house things like family, home property, real estate, where you live, emotional history, your childhood wounds, ancestry, you know, meaning realizing like your ancestral imprint. And what are you still exercising in your life that was put upon you through ancestral patterning that you might be ready to just drop off of the curve because it's not bringing any value at anymore. You might be looking at living situation or just some sort of unresolved emotional narratives, right? Conversations from the past can resurface. Family dynamics may need to be reassessed. There can be a revisiting of, again, housing plans, should we sell? Should we expand? Should we stay? Like, what should we do? Should we relocate? Any of those things. But it doesn't have to be any of those things. It could also just be emotional boundaries within your family system. Now, having Hygeia here does bring a healing theme to all of this, into the home, into the emotional body. So you may become increasingly aware that your physical health is directly connected to emotional stress, nervous system overload, emotional caretaking, or maybe even some sort of unresolved grief that you're only now really seeing. And for a lot of you, this transit correlates with healing the home environment itself, emotionally, psychologically, physically, the whole thing, right? And this could also be just a heightened awareness for a lot of you around caregiving responsibilities involving family members. But what's fascinating here is that Jupiter in Leo sextiles Uranus, Sedna, and Mars in Gemini in your third house. So this is one of the strongest indicators of intellectual awakening for you guys. Now, this could be connected to media growth if you're involved in media, communication expansion, teaching, opportunities, anything connected to writing, speaking, online platforms, like YouTube, podcasting, courses, taking a course, workshops, right? Because the third house is very connected to learning something like from the beginning, like grassroots up. Also connected to marketing, learning, networking, rapid idea generation, right? So for you guys specifically, having Gemini as the ruler of your third house of all of those things, Uranus is really lighting up your mind. It's a very smart, and I've gone on about this in a couple of my past videos. Uranus in the third is like a little magical when it comes to the mind. It could be a little disruptive though, because you could feel so much smarter than everyone around you. I know that sounds ridiculous, but just like that things download quicker for you when Uranus is in the third. And when you say it and other people aren't where you're at, you could feel very misunderstood. Or people could be like, where are you going with that mindset? Or really, you want to study that? You want to do that? You know what I'm saying? Like it's electrifies the mind, right? Your thinking accelerates rapidly, especially with this position to Jupiter. Forget it. When it goes in, it's just going to be like, you might suddenly develop an entirely new way of fill in the third house blank, teaching, communicating, presenting information. Your voice becomes more unconventional, innovative, original, right? Now, Mars in Gemini adds a lot of speed, right? He likes speed and urgency and ambition. Like, I have to say this, I have to do this, I have to get this out, right? So, this could even really motivate you to just want to say something, especially to a sibling or extended family, right? So you just want to be mindful of that. You want to just think a little bit before you speak, but you may be juggling, multiple projects at the same time. Your mind may just be moving faster than your body can actually process. So there's this, it's enormous productivity potential here, but also nervous system overload. So you really have to be very mindful of pacing yourself. Now, Sedna adds a deeper psychological undertone here, where your voice may become more emotionally honest, um, spiritual revealing, or willing to discuss subjects that you once avoided for whatever reason. Because it's opposing the ninth house, maybe a kind of religion or your politics or just your worldview, right? Ninth house is worldview as well. It just could be like you felt like you've been suppressing it for years, and suddenly when Jupiter ingresses in there, it's just going to be like, I have to say this, right? Which is great. Just be mindful of how it is that you say it. Now, this sextile between Jupiter in the fifth and Gemini planets in the third is unbelievably fantastic for teaching astrology. For those of you who are fellow teachers, public speaking, workshops, anything on YouTube, writing, any kind of educational project, opening your own business, anything with performance work, publishing. What else? Building a larger audience around your ideas. It's just visibility through communication. The communication could actually be focused on something connected to your children, the idea of children, or maybe you want to help one of your children open a business or do something to help their future. But at the same time, Jupiter is also quincunxing the North Node retrograde at 0 degrees in Pisces in your 12th house. And this is subtle, but extremely karmic here, right? Because the 12th house represents the unconscious mind, endings, healings, spirituality, retreat, grief, self-undoing, hidden fears, divine surrender. The veil is very thin in the 12th house between worlds. And the quincunx here suggests this pressure between growing external, externally visible, and your inner spiritual emotional world and the healing that's going on there. You guys are doing a lot of healing right behind the scenes because parts of you want to expand, want to create, you want to be recognized, right? That momentum, right? You want to have that here I am kind of thing on the one hand. But then you have part of you still needs to rest and emotionally process. And you feel like you need the solitude, you need closure from an old cycle. So you may notice periods where you feel socially on and energized. It's like, all right, let's go. Here I am, followed by absolute exhaustion, right? And emotional depletion. You are going to feel a lot more sensitive. I do want to say this, a lot more sensitive to other people's energy, right? When Jupiter during this Jupiter transit. You're just going to really be sensing it, right? A little deeper. And this transit just can produce a super strange sensation of simultaneously wanting attention and wanting to disappear. So it's important not to ignore that 12th house North Node energy. Your intuition is evolving profoundly now, Aries risings to a lesser degree, Sun and Moon, but Aries energy in general. So dreams and psychic sensitivity and emotional downloads and spiritual awareness may intensify dramatically. Now, the square from Jupiter in Leo to Chiron and Taurus in your second house is one of the biggest growth challenges in your chart. The second house rules self-worth, finances, security, income, stability, possessions, and things that you value, things that have worth to you, right? Now, Chiron's only going to be in there for the summer. Right? I spoke about that in the last video, just June, July, August. Then he goes back into Aries until the spring, and then he's going to go back into Taurus for 7 years, okay? So this is going to give a little bit of a preview. And with Chiron and Taurus here, this does suggest some long-standing wounds involving security, money, self-esteem, survival fears, feeling undervalued. And as Jupiter expands your fifth house creatively and visibly, old fears around worthiness can absolutely become triggered. So you may question whether you deserve success and recognition and abundance or creative fulfillment at all, you know? And you do. Keep in mind that Chiron is always, not sometimes, Chiron is a false narrative that represents a very deep wound that we all have within us. And he will challenge those wounds just so that we can see how much stronger we are. Okay. Now, financially, for you guys, this can be a year where you attempt to monetize your gifts more seriously, but emotionally, you may carry fears connected to instability or scarcity. So, the key here is that Jupiter is trying to expand your confidence, while Chiron exposes where confidence has historically been fractured. He's only going to be dipping in very seriously over the summer, but this is going to up until the spring of 2027. So you're going to be toying with that this year, right? Because this kind of transit is asking if you can allow yourself to become more visible without immediately sabotaging yourself through fear. Yeah, what's the answer to that for you? Now, there may be also more important lessons involving other second house things like pricing, right? Charging appropriately for your expertise, valuing your time, or learning not to undercut your own gifts, right? Because you can end up undervaluing yourself. You want to just be mindful of that. Now, finally, Jupiter trining Neptune in Aries in your first house is beautiful and it's spiritual and it's significant. Okay. Neptune in the first is dissolving your old identities and reshaping your entire sense of self. Your intuition, your sensitivity, your creativity, your spiritual awareness are heightened tremendously during this period. Now, I do want to also say that because Neptune also can represent self-sabotage, and the first house is the first house of body, please be kind to yourself. Please be kind to yourself when it comes to your physical, okay? Because sometimes Neptune can show up in the first house, and people are super hard on themselves when it comes to their weight and when it comes to their physical appearance and you just be really hard on yourself, right? Because there could be confusion associated with that. So I wanted to just give that as a little aside, okay? You're amazing, and don't give Neptune that power, okay? Now we want to always work within the illuminated portion of Neptune, right? We don't want to welcome in the more toxic side of Neptune, right? We don't want to welcome it in. Nope, nope, nope. Okay. Now the trine from Jupiter to Leo in that Neptune energy that we're talking about here, and it's creating this very powerful flow between your self-expression and your spiritual identity. So what's really cool about this is it can make you incredibly magnetic to people, very inspirational, imaginative, creative, compassionate, a bit of a visionary, being able to see things a little differently, which would beautifully support that artistic work, any sort of spiritual teaching, healing work, any kind of intuitive development, creative performance, and just emotionally resonant communication, right? Just people getting you, right? Getting you. But that Neptune in the first house, it does require grounding again because of the confusion and the fluidity, right, that it brings when it comes to being able to identify your true sense of self. So you may periodically feel kind of uncertain about who you are, where you're going. Jupiter does help restore confidence, but you still may need some strong boundaries there. You may need rest, that nervous system care, and emotional discernment. But overall, for you guys, this ingress into Leo is the beginning of a major creative and personal expansion cycle, right? The fifth house is very personal, but one that unfolds against this backdrop of profound social transformation, emotional healing, nervous system recalibration, and spiritual awakening. So your voice is growing, your visibility is growing, your creativity is growing, but your internal foundation has to evolve with it. So there is nothing superficial about this energy, Leo. This is a heart-centered reinvention. I'm calling you Leo. Leo energy. This is not a superficial Leo energy. Aries, right? This is a heart-centered kind of reinvention for you guys. So I hope this was helpful in some way. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Hello, Taurus rising to a lesser degree, Taurus sun and moon. Jupiter moving into Leo at 0 degrees on June 30th initiates an enormous shift in your area of home, emotional security, family dynamics, and the foundation of your life. Now, in whole house astrology, which is what we're doing here, Leo is in your fourth house. So Jupiter and entering this part of your chart begins a year-long expansion, hasn't been here in 12 years, involving your private world, your living situation, emotional well-being, your family lineage, your roots, property matters, and the deeper psychological structures underneath everything that you're building externally. Jupiter entering this new sign at 0 degrees is powerful because it feels like the opening of a completely new chapter. So there's often a feeling that life is beginning to reorganize itself from the inside out. So for you guys, this can manifest as a growing desire to create more emotional stability, more warmth in the home, more authenticity within family relationships, or even a completely different vision of where and how you want to live. Don't be surprised. Now, some of you may move, you may renovate, expand your household, because Jupiter expands. You may reconnect with family or finally begin prioritizing emotional fulfillment instead of just surviving these survival obligations. Now, because Leo is involved, there's also a stronger theme of reclaiming pride, dignity, joy, those are all very Leonine things, and personal identity through home and family spaces. So you may feel increasingly unwilling to just tolerate these environments that drain your spirit and make you feel emotionally unseen. All right, because the fourth house is not only the physical home, it's also your internal foundation. So Jupiter here wants to expand your capacity to feel emotionally safe and emotionally rooted and emotionally alive, even if it has nothing to do with home, property, real estate, or whatever. It could just be connected to your internal space. Now, and a little bit of a however, right? This transit immediately enters in opposition to Pluto and Juno, both retrograde in Aquarius in your 10th house. So this creates one of this, like the very defining theme of this cycle, I feel, which is this tension between your private life, fourth house, and your public life, 10th house. Now, the 10th house is your career, reputation, authority, public responsibilities, long-term goals, visibility, external achievement. A lot of people are just like, oh, it's career and I'm not working, right? Because a lot of people aren't working. Or maybe just working part-time and it's really not such a thing. But you want to look at it additionally as these your long-term, you know, so the 11th house is more like what's going on for the next 10 to 15 years. The 10th house is like we're talking long term, right? So you may begin realizing that certain, for many of you, professional structures or just general obligations or public expectations are no longer sustainable emotionally for you, right? Where you thought you were going, might not feel so comfortable anymore. And Juno retrograde in the 10th intensifies this because it suggests a reevaluation of commitments involving career partnerships or any of these public obligations. For a lot of you, it could be you're reevaluating your marriage dynamics or contracts, leadership roles, or any kind of long-standing responsibilities. Now, there can be a growing awareness around unequal dynamics as well. You know, emotional exhaustion from constantly holding things together, or the realization that success without emotional fulfillment just no longer feels meaningful to you and you can't unfeel that. This opposition can manifest as major decisions involving your work-life balance or where it is that you live and where it is that you want to end up. So you may feel pulled between it's and the thing is, guys, these are angular houses, houses 4 and 10. Angular houses are 1, 4, 7, and 10. So whenever we have heavy activation there, there's this very strong desire for movement. We kind of have to honor that. We have to move, right? You're being made to think about these things. So you may again feel very pulled between building this external success and protecting your inner peace. So a lot of you may step away from professional situations that, you know, quite frankly, have just become too psychologically draining for you. While others of you just may restructure your careers entirely so that you can create more freedom for yourself and emotional well-being and family stability. Now, at the same time, Jupiter is conjunct Mercury retrograde and Hygeia in Cancer in your third house. And this is extremely significant because it shows that communication and mental processing, and family conversations, paperwork, including contracts, anything having to do with teaching, writing, learning, siblings, emotional communication are all very deeply tied during this transition. So Mercury retrograde in the third suggests, Mercury rules the third, right? So it's this revisiting of conversations from the past and rethinking decisions and reconnecting with people and renegotiating plans or mentally processing old emotional material. Now, there may be important discussions involving, for many of you, family situation could have to do with property, housing, or many of you may be needing to make a career decision. There may be important discussions involving family in the way that there's got to be some sort of revision of something that was maybe agreed upon or discussed earlier. There could be old patterns of silence coming up, emotional suppression, over explaining, or people pleasing. Any of these energies become super obvious, right? At the end of the month, where are you being too much of a people pleaser, or where is somebody else trying to be that? Right? Now, Hygeia in the third adds a healing component connected to the nervous system and mental well-being, which is helpful, right? Because emotional stress can easily show up physically through exhaustion and overstimulation and, not sleeping well and just feeling burnt out and anxious. So this transit asks you to just become a lot more conscious of how thoughts and conversations and emotional environments affect your physical body. Now, Jupiter in Leo, sextiling Uranus and Sedna and Mars and Gemini, all in your second house, is one of the strongest indicators of financial change and resource development in your chart right now. That second house rules income, money, possessions, survival, your ability to feel like you have a strong foundation, personal security. It's connected to your values, your self-worth. Um, I do want to say that it's also connected to like your thyroid. It's connected to food. So we want to be careful that we don't gain too much weight while Jupiter is in our second house. We don't drink too much. Um, we want to keep our nervous system balanced so that we don't end up with any sort of inflammatory issue over the course of this next year. Again, nothing to be afraid of, just something to be mindful of, okay? Now, Uranus in Gemini continues to radically alter the way you guys earn money and define stability. So there could be an unexpected opportunity, some sort of unconventional income stream, some sort of sudden financial shift, like a tech or online expansion for some of you, multiple simultaneous revenue sources developing. Mars and Gemini adds this urgency and ambition and movement, right? So financial matters may move pretty quickly here once Jupiter is in the fold, right? So you may be highly motivated to build income, diversify your resources, monetize your skills, or just become more independent financially, right? It could just be that. Now, Sedna here adds emotional depth to the financial story. So there may be deep survival fears surfacing underneath practical financial concerns, right? You may become more aware of old wounds connected to security, trust, abandonment, or feeling unsupported. And Jupiter sextile helps create opportunity, but emotionally, there may still be this anxiety around stability, even if or when growth is happening. So, this configuration, right, strongly supports making money through communication, education, teaching, speaking, writing, media, online work, social platforms, sales, even anything that requires a lot of multitasking or intellectual skills. It can also indicate a major shift in how exactly you value yourself professionally and emotionally. Now, Jupiter quincunxing the North Node retrograded 0 degrees in Pisces in your 11th house creates an adjustment between your growing need for emotional grounding and your evolving future path, particularly involving friendships, the networks that you hang with, the communities that you hang out with. If you're in the public eye, like your audience, collaborations that you're involved with, and even your long-term hopes and dreams. Okay. Now, that North Node in the 11th is pulling you toward a larger vision for your future, new networks, collective work, soul-aligned communities. It could just be that. But Jupiter in the fourth house may simultaneously require you to pull inward emotionally. So this can create periods where you feel socially overwhelmed or not totally certain about how much access others should have to you and your energy. That whole idea of like boundaries and you know what I'm saying? So there's going to need to be a little bit of balancing out there. Now, for a lot of you, certain friendships, certain networks that you're involved with may no longer feel emotionally aligned to you. So you might outgrow communities that once felt safe for you. And at the same time, new people who you do feel aligned with may slowly begin entering your life as your emotional foundation changes as we roll out the rest of the year. Now, the square from Jupiter in Leo to Chiron and Taurus in that first house of yours, right? Because Chiron is going to be in your sign for June, July, August. This is deeply personal. It's very emotionally revealing. Chiron in the first house often reflects wounds involving identity, confidence, visibility, self-worth, body image, or the feeling of being fundamentally misunderstood. And as Jupiter expands fourth house emotional themes, old identity wounds can surface strongly. So family patterns can rise to the surface, revealing where you learned at some point how to minimize yourself or how you learned to overfunction emotionally, or you carry responsibilities consistently that aren't even yours, and maybe you've been doing that for your whole life. So this transit can bring healing, but healing often begins to expose where the pain still exists, right? Because it's not like we say, oh, okay, I recognize that that's what I do. Let me just not do that anymore. It doesn't work like that, right? There's always like some sort of pain there, and that's going to come up as like a sensitivity, like a heightened sensitivity. You're just in general going to be a lot more sensitive, right? Your physical body as well as your stress response. So emotional pressure may become physically difficult to ignore. For a lot of you, you may need to pay closer attention to rest. Again, nervous system regulation. I feel like a broken record there, but for sure, grounding practices, meditation, whatever, prayer, whatever does it for you to just kind of bring you back down. Pay attention to the food that you're eating. Nutrition is super important, as well as your emotional boundaries are very important during this transit. Now, finally, a Jupiter trining Neptune in Aries in your 12th house gives this entire transit a deeply spiritual and karmic undertone. There's Neptune in the 12th. First of all, Neptune lives in the 12th, so he's at home there. And he's all about dissolving old unconscious patterns, hidden fears, grief, escapism, emotional, just muck and stuff, just like that residue, emotional residue from the past. So this placement highlights intuition tremendously, right, in the 12th house. And the trine between Jupiter in the fourth and Neptune in the 12th supports profound emotional healing, ancestral healing, spiritual growth, lots of dream activity, lots of psychic sensitivity, therapy work, creative imagination, emotional surrender. Guys, just make sure that you are praying in love and light, because even Satan always presents itself as a sweetheart, right? And something beautiful and imaginary, and it's not. So just be careful with what it is. Honestly, you do what you want. I would just be remiss if I didn't say stay away from the witchcraft stuff and all of that stuff while you have this transit over the next year. That I mean that, okay? Just energetically, it won't be a good thing for you. You will start not feeling well from it. You don't want to let the negative energies in. And again, sometimes they look real pretty So just be careful. Now, there's also going to be this strong need for you guys. I don't want to overspeak that. There's also going to be this strong need for you guys to have solitude and emotional retreat at times, right? So your spirit may require a lot more quiet, more privacy, more protection from overstimulation. This is not weakness. You're recalibrating right now. Recalibration. Okay. So overall, this Jupiter ingress into Leo marks the beginning of a major restructuring of your emotional foundation, your relationship to security and what that means, the balance between your inner life and your outer responsibility. There's enormous potential for emotional growth here. Great energy for family healing, financial reinvention, spiritually waking up, but only if you're willing to stop building your life around exhaustion and worry and over responsibility and just being in survival mode, right? This is ultimately a transit for you guys connected to rebuilding your life from the foundation upward so that when you create externally, when you're ready to do that, you're finally capable of supporting who you are becoming internally. So that is what I have for you guys. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Hi, Jen. I hope you guys are doing great. So Jupiter is at 0 degrees on June 30th, entering a major third house cycle, right, for you guys in whole house. So this is the house of besides your home, communication and teaching and writing and speaking and learning and siblings and neighbors in your neighborhood and local travel and short-term planning of all kinds and media messaging. Um, it's just the mind and the way the mind your mind processes itself each day. Now, this is a significant shift because Jupiter in Leo wants to make the voice, third house, bigger, brighter, more confident, more visible. So for you guys, this can begin a year. He hasn't been here for 12 years, since 12 years. So for the next year, it was to begin this year where your words carry a lot more influence. So you may be called to do some Gemini kind of things, whether it's teach, speak, write, publish, promote, market, create content. Maybe you're taking classes, you're learning something from the grassroots point up. Um, maybe leading a discussion, launching a course, developing a platform, or just becoming a lot more visible through your ideas. Third house is not passive. It's not. It's a house of daily movement and mental exchange. And so with Jupiter there, life becomes very busy, very loud, more connected, more intellectually active. Because Jupiter enters at that 0 degree, there is this fresh initiation quality to this transit. So I feel like a new voice is emerging. You may begin speaking with more authority, more warmth, more courage, or even creative passion, right? Leo adds this performative energy, this confidence in heart and personal flair, right? And for you guys, this is excellent for anything involving public communication, again, education, social media, writing, anything where you're getting yourself out there, if you're interviewing somebody, even if it's even connected to like local community involvement, like getting out there into community. But this is not just about talking more, right? This is about learning to communicate from the heart, instead of only from the mind, right? Is as a Gemini rising, right? That Gemini energy is just very air, right? Leo is fire, right? It's very heart, right? So not only being able to intellectualize, okay, well, this makes sense, right? But getting the heart involved, right? So a lot of you can process quickly and analyze everything and move ideas, super rapidly. But the Jupiter and Leo energy in that third is asking you to speak with conviction. It's also asking you to believe in your message. Because if you don't believe in your message, it's not going to come out the same, right? Now, Jupiter in Leo immediately opposes Pluto and Juno retrograde in Aquarius in your ninth house. Now, this creates a powerful third house, ninth house axis activation, where the third house is everyday communication, while the ninth house rules higher ed, publishing, law, legalities, governance, legal matters, long distance travel, any dealing with anyone from like a foreign land, foreign culture, belief system, worldview kind of thing, philosophy, religion, organized or otherwise, um, certifications. I said higher ed, I believe. What else? Ninth house is also the manifestation of father energy. Okay, now, so Pluto retrograde in Aquarius in the ninth suggests this deep transformation of what it is that you believe, what you teach, how you understand truth, how you relate to institutions of knowledge or authority, just in general. So you may be questioning old ideologies, academic systems, your spiritual beliefs, your religion, your legal framework, your long-range goals, right? So there could be this profound change just in general in how it is that you see the world. Now, Juno retrograde in the ninth adds this reevaluation of commitments connected to teaching and education, publishing, travel, legal issues, mentorship, or even spiritual communities. So right now you may be reconsidering a contract or a course of study or a path to publishing something that you've written, or you may be reconsidering a long distance connection or a long distance experience, maybe, right? That you've been wanting, or just some sort of belief system that you once held, that you once felt not only held, but you felt very loyal to it, right? Now, the opposition from Jupiter in the third to Pluto and Juno in the ninth can create tension between the information that you're sharing now and this deep truth that you're uncovering. So you might feel like pressure here to speak or to teach or to explain something before you feel fully certain, or you may realize that what you used to believe no longer matches what you're now communicating. And this can be a very powerful time for teachers and writers, obviously, students, speakers, astrologers, coaches, and content creators. However, it can also bring intense debates, ideological conflict, or power struggles around what truth actually is. So you may need to be careful with dogmatic thinking, either from yourself or from other people, right? You might be not that way at all, but you might be on the receiving end of that. And the lesson here is to try to allow your mind to stay open while your voice becomes stronger and while not closing anyone else down at the same time. Now, Jupiter is also conjunct Mercury retrograde and Hygeia in Cancer in your second house. This brings money, income, value, self-worth, possessions, and personal security directly into the mix here. So Mercury retrograde in Cancer in the second house suggests that final decisions may need to be reviewed. Thinking differently about money. You may be rethinking just your income or pricing or spending or your business model or the value of your skills. Old financial conversations can come back around for reassessment. You may need to revisit contracts or invoices or payment systems or plans involving income and resources. And because Mercury is retrograde in Cancer, these final reflections are emotionally charged. Money may not just feel like money, right? It may connect directly to feeling safe, an old conditioned response to money, right? That could be family conditioning, right? Fear of instability, or just this need to feel protected. And for a lot of you, Jupiter in the third may encourage you to communicate and teach and write, or just market more boldly, right? While Mercury retrograde in the second is like, okay, but are you valuing your voice properly? So being able to balance those out. Now, Hygeia in Cancer in that second, it does heal and add a healing layer to it. I'm sorry, around money, also the body, because second house is very connected to the health of our internal organs. Second house is also our mouth. It's the food that we eat, anything that we put in our mouth. Or weight. So this can show a need to stabilize your nervous system around financial stress. It can also point to healing self-worth patterns, especially if you've undercharged or undervalued yourself or tied your sense of security to other people's approval. All right. This is going to become like very loud in your energy. You're not going to be able to not see it. So this combination can be very supportive for monetizing communication skills, but it does require you to revisit how you define your worth. So your voice may be valuable, but you have to treat it that way, right? You can't undervalue yourself. Now, Jupiter in Leo sextiles Uranus, Saturn, and Mars in Gemini in your first house, which makes this transit especially personal and energizing. The first house rules identity and body and appearance and visibility, how people see you, your vitality, your confidence, your personal direction, and just like the way you initiate yourself in life, right? You get up in the morning, you put your feet on the floor. Okay. So Uranus and Gemini in the first is already radically changing your identity. He's a slow mover, even though we talk about like sudden reversals, but he works very slow and deliberate under the surface first. And then comes the change. So you may be starting to feel very restless, ready to reinvent yourself, less willing to feel boxed in, and just more drawn toward unconventional choices. Because with Mars and Gemini in the first, that adds a lot of drive. Mars rules the first, right? Lots of drive, lots of urgency, boldness. Come on, let's go, mental speed. But you might not have it all figured out yet. Like that's just what Mars is in the first house. You feel busier, you feel more assertive, you feel more expressive, more willing to initiate change. And it's like you know what you want, but all of the missing pieces on how to actually get there, you may not really understand. That's why we call like Mars in the first house, it's the energy of leadership, because leadership knows how to come up with the game plan, but not necessarily have um, any intention on being the one to actually solve all the problems along the way in order to make it happen, right? It's like first house energy is like the ideas person, right? And I'm going to oversee everything, right? So having all of that, but then at some point recognizing, okay, I have to pull back and figure out how am I going to actually make this happen for myself. Now, Sedna in the first house does add depth to this identity shift. There may be old survival patterns surfacing, places where you learn to detach and adapt or just rely on yourself. So you may be becoming more aware of just how past instability that you experience has shaped your personality, as well as how it is that you communicate to people. You know, from like, do you communicate from a fear-based place, or is it, a higher level, more confident? Um, a lot of you are going to be realizing this. Now, the sextile from Jupiter in the third house to Gemini first house planets is excellent for confidence and visibility and personal reinvention and communication and teaching, creating content, anything having to do with movement, right? Movement, sports, even, right? You might feel like your mind, your body, and your voice are kind of all waking up at once. So you may become more willing to say what you mean, take up space, introduce yourself to the world in a new way, and just feel a lot more confident about it, right? Now, this can also bring a very fast pace. So you may have many ideas and conversations and projects and running here and there, doing errands and all of these things happening all at once. So the opportunity is enormous, but the overstimulation is a real thing. So Mars and Uranus in the first can make your nervous system feel electric, right? But you may need to consciously slow down, take a rest, avoid scattering your energy everywhere. You just have to be careful here, okay? Because we don't want anybody to have any car accidents, okay? This is an energy where you have to say, okay, let me stay within the speed limit. Let me be very conscious, okay? Because it's too easy for you to have 12 things on your mind and just not be paying the same amount of attention as you normally would, okay? Now, Jupiter quincunxing the North Node retrograde at 0 degrees in Pisces in your 10th creates an adjustment between your growing communication life and your evolving career path. So the 10th house rules public reputation, all those 10th house profession, visibility, your long-term plans, your long-term direction. The North Node in Pisces in the 10th suggests that your soul growth is moving toward a more intuitive and compassionate and creative and spiritually aligned public role of some kind. So you may be pulled toward work that feels more meaningful and less rigid and just more emotionally resonant. But the quincunx from Jupiter in the third suggests that your daily communication habits need adjustment in order to support that larger calling, right? So you really need to think about how it is that you just like legit communicate with people, right? You may have to refine your messaging, be a little more mindful before you speak. You may need to stop over explaining yourself, communicate with more trust, less nervousness, more spiritual clarity. So there might also even be this tension between short-term busyness and long-term purpose. Just because something is urgent doesn't mean it's aligned with you or it's even that important over the long term, right? Now, this aspect is asking you to adjust again the way that you not only speak, but teach and write and share information so that the message supports the public identity that you're becoming and not who you were. So the square from Jupiter and Leo to Chiron and Taurus in your 12th house is one of the more sensitive parts of this transit as well. The 12th house rules the unconscious mind and hidden griefs and hidden fears and isolation and retreat and self-undoing. It's very connected to the 12th. So Chiron and Taurus in the 12th can point to these deep private wounds around safety and abandonment and self-worth and body security, material security, of feeling unsupported in ways that aren't always visible to other people. And these wounds may be quiet and they may be buried and difficult to name, but they're there. And as Jupiter expands your third house of communication, these private wounds may be triggered by speaking up, being heard, teaching, or just becoming more visible intellectually. You may notice fears around saying the wrong thing, being misunderstood, being judged, or exposing too much of yourself. There may also be unconscious patterns of self-sacrificing. Now, this square can bring healing through naming what's been hidden. So, journaling and therapy and meditation, private reflection, all really good stuff. But the key here is to not let old fear keep you quiet. It's important that you not force yourself into this constant visibility without tending to the more vulnerable parts of you that need some grace and some gentleness. Okay. Now, finally, Jupiter in Leo trining Neptune in Aries in your 11th house. This is beautiful for friendships and community and audiences and networks and dreams, goals and gains, especially things you want to do over the next like 10 to 15 years. Groups that you're involved with, like creative groups. The 11th house rules people who gather around your vision and what it is that you want. So Neptune in Aries in the 11th is dissolving these old social identities and reshaping your relationship to community. So you may feel more drawn towards spiritual, creative, intuitive, artistic, or any kind of like healing centered groups. You may also become more sensitive to the energy of your audience or your social circle. If you are, if you do anything having to do with like, if you're a creator of any kind. Now, the trine from Jupiter in the third to Neptune in the 11th is excellent for inspired communication. So your words may reach people emotionally and spiritually, and this is beautiful for, again, teaching, writing, creating videos, building community, just connecting with people through imagination and compassion. There can be a sense that your voice is not only informative, though, it's also healing. So you attract in this energy people who resonate with your message on a deeper level, but Neptune is still asking for discernment. So not every group or audience or friendship is clear. You may need to sort of trust your intuition about where your energy actually belongs. But overall, for you guys, this is a this is a transit that just brings lots of communication expansion, intellectual confidence, again, expanding the teaching, the writing, the visibility, the self-expression, all of those Shumanian things. Your voice becomes more central, your ideas become more powerful, your message may reach further than before. But this transit is also asking you to integrate a deeper truth. It's asking you to integrate financial worth and nervous system care, private healing, spiritual community, being aligned with your career too. I mean, this is a very important note here. So it's not only about speaking more, it's about speaking with greater courage and value and true purpose for you. And of course, communicating with your heart. All right, my friends, that is what I have for you. I hope this extra video was helpful. Thanks so much for hanging with me. See you guys next time. Bye-bye. Hi, Cancer, rising to a lesser degree, Cancer, Sun, and Moon. So you want to watch for all three. Jupiter moving into Leo at 0 degrees on June 30th begins a major second house cycle for you guys, which is the house of income and money and possessions and personal resources and self-worth, stability, confidence in the way that you build material and emotional security for yourself. And because Jupiter is entering into Leo, it's not quiet, right? Leo is loud and large, right? So this is a year where your relationship with money and value and personal confidence becomes much bigger, more visible, more central. You may feel increasingly called to earn in ways that actually reflect what you bring to the table, right? Your true talents and creativity, leadership, your generosity, your authentic identity. Is Leo in the second asks you to stop minimizing your value. And it asks you to really recognize where your gifts deserve to be more honored and paid for and taken seriously. Now, Jupiter entering at 0 degrees makes this feel like a beginning of a completely new financial and self-worth chapter. It's just what it's actually going to feel like that, right? So there may be, for many of you, a new income opportunity, a new pricing structure. If you're already in something where you receive compensation through, like, for your services, you may be redesigning your pricing structure, or new investment in yourself, or a stronger desire to build a life that feels more materially secure but emotionally fulfilling. This can be a powerful transit from making money through creative work and leadership and teaching, teaching of all kinds, anything connected to children, is with children, anything connected to children, really. Performance, entertainment, because it's all Leo, education, entrepreneurship, any path where your personality and your heart are part of what it is that you're offering. But Jupiter in Leo immediately opposes Pluto and Juno retrograde in Aquarius in your 8th house. So this brings a major activation on that axis of money versus shared, your money versus shared money, your resources versus what somebody else has, your self-worth versus any sort of emotional entanglement that you're involved with, your values versus like a contract. 8th house is debts, it's inheritance, it's taxes, loans, intimacy, dependency, financial obligations. It's a big house. But Pluto retrograde in the 8th is already deeply transforming the way that you deal with trust and vulnerability and shared finances and all of these things, power dynamics and emotional merging and psychological intimacy. And we've been talking about this, right? Because Pluto is the modern ruler of the 8th house. So he's at home there. He's very comfortable there. And he's more than happy to help clean out your basement in that 8th house. So there may be intense realizations around where you have felt financially or emotionally dependent, or controlled, or obligated, or entangled in some way. So this can bring some shadow work around fear and survival and betrayal and inheritance patterns with deeply buried emotional material that you still need to go through. Now, Juno retrograde in the 8th adds a review of commitments involving shared resources and all these things, marriage, finances, any kind of business partnership, loans, debt, taxes, inheritance, all of the intimate bonds. You may be reassessing what you owe others, what others owe you, and whether certain financial or emotional agreements are still fair. Now, the opposition from Jupiter in the 2nd to Pluto and Juno in the 8th can bring financial growth, but it may also expose imbalances, right? As your own income and confidence or personal value begins to expand in that 2nd house, you may become more aware of situations where you've given too much power away. So for a lot of you, this can be a turning point in reclaiming financial independence, or renegotiating shared obligations, or healing patterns of over dependence. Now, Jupiter is also connected to Mercury retrograde in Hygiene and Cancer in your first house when he first ingresses into Leo. And this makes the transit deeply personal because Cancer, this is a because Cancer is your rising sun and the first house rules everything about self and your identity and your body and your appearance and your personal direction and just how you're approaching life. And with Mercury retrograde in there, it's this period of self-review, rethinking, who am I? How do I present myself? How do I communicate? What story do I tell myself about my life? So a lot of you are going to be revisiting these old personal decisions and just reconsidering your direction or just becoming a lot more aware of how emotional narratives have shaped your confidence. Now, Hygeia in Cancer in the first brings health and healing and body awareness into focus, right? So your body may be speaking loudly during this time, especially if financial stress or emotional pressure or any kind of like emotional or relational, even I guess we could say entanglement, um, has been weighing on you. This is a strong reminder that your self-worth is not only a financial issue, it's also physical and emotional. So if your body's been carrying a lot of survival stress, this transit is going to bring it up into awareness, and that's a good thing. Is Jupiter in Leo also sextiling Uranus, Sedna, and Mars in Gemini in your 12th, which rules the unconscious mind and hidden fears and grief and private struggles and self-undoing, you're really going to be like really looking at the deeper recesses of your own energy while you're dealing with these things externally. Now, this 12th house energy is very subtle, but it's powerful. Uranus and Gemini in the 12th can bring sudden breakthroughs from the unconscious. So you may have an unexpected realization or some kind of vivid dream that sticks with you that kind of changes things, if that makes sense, or some kind of spiritual download, or just a moment where old mental patterns suddenly become super clear to you out of nowhere. And Mars in the 12th can stir hidden anger and anxiety and private pressure with this need to act on things that have been building underneath the surface. Sedna in the 12th adds these themes of abandonment and betrayal and survival memory, or places where you may have learned to emotionally disconnect in order to cope. Now, the sextile from Jupiter in the second to these 12th house energies that we're talking about suggests that financial and self-worth growth is connected to hidden healing. This is a good thing. So as you're clearing these unconscious fears of grief and guilt and the old survival programming, all that residual anger, you may become more able to receive money, value your skills, stabilize your life. Right? This can also very much support private work, any work that you're doing behind the scenes, like projects behind the scenes, any kind of spiritual development, excellent for therapy, for research, for writing in solitude, or preparing something quietly before it becomes more visible. There's opportunity here, but it requires two things. It requires rest and it requires self-honesty. If you push too hard without addressing what is happening internally, the nervous system will likely become overstimulated. And this is a transit that says your financial growth may depend on healing what's been quietly draining your energy here. Now, Jupiter quincunxing the North Node retrograde at 0 degrees Pisces in your ninth creates an adjustment between your financial and your self-worth growth and your evolving path around belief system, around teaching in higher education and publishing and a legal situation, any kind of legal matter, spirituality, a long-range vision. The North Node in Pisces in the ninth is pulling you toward faith, toward wisdom and intuitive learning, spiritual perspective, and a broader understanding of life. However, Jupiter in the second may be forced on, this idea of practical security, income, and tangible resources. So the quincunx suggests that you may need to adjust how your values align with your larger beliefs, right? You're really going to have to kind of balance out, like, what is it that you really want to do? Are you going to be able to make enough money to be okay doing that? And these are just real questions and answers, right? And also asking, what do you truly believe you deserve? And does your work reflect your spiritual values? Are you building security in a way that aligns with your future? And a big one here is asking yourself if you're underpricing something because you lack faith in your own path, right? Meaning, continuing to accept like the much lower income or keeping your prices at a low point because you just don't feel worthy of more than that. Or you try to excuse, why something is the way that it is. And it comes from a place of good, but it comes from a place of meaning there's no malice on your part, right? But it's more like fear. Now, this energy can also bring adjustments involving things like education costs, publishing plans, travel expenses, or legal or certification matters, or the financial side of some sort of spiritual or teaching path, connecting to the money, right? Of that side of things. Now, the square from Jupiter in Leo to Chiron and Taurus in your 11th is one of the more sensitive pieces of your chart right now. That 11th rules friendships, groups, your networks, your communities, your hopes and dreams, goals and gains, right? Again, people who gather around you for your future. Now, Chiron and Taurus in the 11th can point to wounds around belonging, feeling socially accepted, friendship security, being valued by a community, or feeling excluded from a group that seemed more stable or established. Now, there may be old pain around not feeling supported by friends or not feeling recognized by an audience or feeling as though your dreams were not taken very seriously. And as Jupiter expands your second house of money and self-worth, these 11th house wounds that we're talking about can become more obvious. So you may notice who supports your growth and who doesn't, right? Financial or personal growth can sometimes shift friendships because your values begin to change, right? So you may no longer be willing to stay connected to people or communities that just can't help themselves, but from, diminishing your worth in one way or another. Now, this square may also bring tension between earning more and feeling accepted. So you may worry that valuing yourself more will alienate others, but the deeper lesson is that true belonging can't require self-abandonment, right? The right community will not ask you to do that, and they will not demand that you stay small, right? So it's super important because none of us can be erasing ourselves anymore, just like as a collective. We have to get out of that, but it's especially powerful for you guys. Now, finally, Jupiter in Leo trining Neptune in Aries in your 10th house. This is going to be a beautiful and inspiring career signature for a lot of you. That 10th house rules career, reputation, again, your visibility, your long-term goals, the status of your marriage as well, leadership. That's that 10th house energy. Now, Neptune and Aries in there is dissolving old career identities and waking up a more intuitive, creative, spiritual, and inspired path for you. But it's like a public path, right? Because 10th house is the most public house. True, a lot of people there. So you maybe feel called toward work that's more, again, compassionate, meaningful, just aligned with your deeper sense of purpose. And sometimes Neptune can make career direction feel unclear when he's in a career house, but it also opens doors to a more visionary calling. So don't fret too much if you don't feel like your feet are not totally solid on the ground. But as things, you have to allow your energy to stay open. Be very open, right? To God being able to send you things, right? We have to keep our energy open, even if you don't understand everything as it's coming in. Now, the trine from Jupiter in the second to Neptune in the 10th can support income growth through work that's inspired. So your public role, your reputation, or your career path may just naturally become more connected to your values and your talents. And this is especially supportive for spiritual work, any kind of creative business, anything in the healing professions, teaching, counseling, intuitive arts, anything in media or leadership or work that helps others in some kind of meaningful way. I know that's a big umbrella there, but as long as there are other people who are benefiting, right, from you. Now, this could also increase trust that your gifts can support you materially, right? There's this beautiful link here between purpose and prosperity, but Neptune reminds you, stay grounded, right? You also remember with Neptune. Now, and not that Neptune directly reminds you. We need to be reminded when dealing with Neptune because Neptune rules the bottomless ocean. How do we feel grounded in a bottomless ocean, in a bottomless anything? No, we can't, right? So we have to create some sort of, makeshift kind of landing. We always have to remember that whenever we have a heavy Neptune energy here. So any sort of like inspiration must still be paired with practical planning and boundaries and wise financial choices, right? You know what I mean? You have this dream, it's like, I'm going to go do that. Okay, great. But how is it all going to play out? So you just don't want to forget that part. Now, overall, for you guys, I just feel like this is a powerful year of financial growth, of self-worth healing, resource development, and your values are going to be realigning themselves. So this isn't just about making more money. It's about reclaiming the right to feel secure and respected and valued. Then the deeper message of this transit is that your financial life can't be separated from your emotional life. As you heal those old survival wounds, renegotiate imbalanced entanglements in your life. Trust your body, align your work with your purpose more than any of this. And I've talked about this so many times in different videos. You guys have to truly believe and love what it is that you do. It's got to align with your purpose. And you begin to build this stronger foundation of worth from the inside out. So that is what I have for you, my friends. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Hi, Leo. I hope you guys are doing great. This is specifically for Leo rising to a lesser degree, sun and moon, but I say watch all three. So obviously Jupiter moving into your energy at 0 degrees on June 30th is a big deal, right? It begins a first house cycle for you in whole house astrology, which is what we are doing here. And this is one of the most personally significant Jupiter transits because the first house rules identity, your body, vitality, your appearance, the version of you that people understand to be you before they really get to know you. So sort of like understand your affect, your confidence, your personal direction, your self-expression, and just the general way that you initiate life. Now, Jupiter moving to the first house can feel like the beginning of a personal rebirth, right? This is a year where you may become more visible, more confident, more expressive, more willing to take up space, confidently. Because Jupiter entering your energy is not about becoming someone else. It's about returning to a more authentic and courageous and heart-centered version of yourself. And at 0 degrees, this ingress has a very fresh quality about it, right? Especially at the end of the month. Something about your identity is beginning again, right? So you may feel a stronger urge to reinvent your appearance or your personal brand or your leadership style or your body, you know, your confidence or your entire sense of direction. So this can be a really powerful year for putting yourself forward, launching something personal, becoming more recognized, or allowing people to just generally see you more fully. However, when Jupiter goes into your energy, it is immediately opposing Pluto and Juno retrograde in Aquarius, right, in your seventh house. So these are angular houses we're talking. The angular houses are 1, 4, 7, and 10. So whenever we have a powerful transit, there's a lot of focus on those energies, and that means something's got to change, right? Something's got to move. So this brings relationships and partnerships and marriage and clients and contracts and one-on-one dynamics into really sharp focus. I should also say the seventh house is your doctors, and it's also your energetic output at work each day, right? Um, Having to do with, forward-facing clients and so forth, right? Now, Pluto retrograde in the seventh is just generally transforming how it is that you relate to others. So power dynamics in relationships become really difficult to ignore, especially during this transit. So you may see where certain partnerships have been controlling where things have been unequal, emotionally intense, or just psychologically complicated. Now, Juno retrograde in the seventh adds a major review of commitments, right? Because Juno is very connected to our commitments, to our marriage, but it's not only marriage, right? In the traditional sense, it's anything that we join ourselves to in any sort of like soul connected commitment. So, again, the obvious one is marriage, but it could also be a business partnership or long-term clients or collaborations or any relationship where loyalty and obligation and mutual agreements matter. Now, as Jupiter expands you first, you may become more aware of where you've outgrown old relationship roles. You may no longer be able to shrink yourself just to keep the peace, right? I mean, this can be empowering on one hand, but it can also very much create tension if other people are just used to you being more accommodating and more available and just a lot more predictable. Now, Jupiter is also connected during this transit to Mercury retrograde and High G in Cancer in your 12th house. And this is adding a private, spiritual, and healing layer beneath that visible growth, right? That 12th house rules the unconscious mind and solitude and grief and closure and hidden fears and self-undoing, all of those 12th house things. And with Mercury retrograde in that space, um, there's going to be a big inner review for you. You know, you may be processing old memories and private worries and emotional patterns and conversations that were just never fully resolved. Even if you had what feels like a million conversations about it, it just never really resolved itself, you know. You might be realizing now also that maybe you aren't really having the right conversations, right? When those things were being discussed. Now, Hygeia here brings healing, which is good. This is a help to the nervous system as well as the emotional body. So, getting rest and sleep and solitude and therapy is wonderful here. Prayer is amazing. Meditation, journaling, just any kind of quiet time is essential, it becomes essential. And this is important because even though Jupiter in the first increases visibility and confidence, your inner world still needs to be taken care of. So you may be preparing for a larger personal chapter while simultaneously closing an old psychological or emotional cycle that you've been living through. Now, Jupiter in Leo sextiles Uranus, Sedna, and Mars in Gemini in your 11th house, and the 11th rules friends and networks and audiences and social media and communities and collaborations. And it's, you know, people who are very supportive of your path. It's the future, especially over the next 10 to 15 years, it's your goals and gains. And that way it is a money house. So you may understand it as that, you know, when you're thinking about money for like retirement or anything like that, or having money for the future. It opposes the fifth house. So do you have enough money to have another child? Do you have enough money to open the business? You know, all of those fifth house things as well. But this is great, just generally having, you know, Uranus, Sedna, and Mars all in that space. This is great for expanding your reach through people. So the people are a good thing for you guys. Uranus and Gemini can bring people are good for all people, right? But especially with this lit up, you know, this can bring sudden new friendships, unexpected opportunities, unconventional communities, rapid changes in your audience and your network. And Mars and Gemini adds movement, adds conversation, invitation, collaboration, a lot of momentum, right? And Sedna adds depth and showing that some of these changes may also touch older themes around trust and belonging and feeling supported. So it's an interesting energy because there's new stuff coming in and it's like, oh my gosh, hold on. It's almost like going into your emotional library, right? And asking yourself, like, who can I trust? How can I trust? Because there's going to be a lot coming at you, but then how do you process it in a way, especially if you have issues of trust and not feeling supported in the past, right? So this sextile can help you though become more visible within you know, community or group, and it supports networking and even teaching and online platforms, social media growth, you know, speaking to any kind of audience, joining new communities, even if you just do it online, you know, becoming like some kind of stronger leader among your peers, even if that's usually something that you may generally just shy away from, is your personal reinvention is directly connected to the people you're reaching. Now, Jupiter quincunxing the North Node retrograde at 0 degrees in Pisces in your eighth house creates an adjustment between your growing independence and the deeper matters that you experience involving trust, shared resources, intimacy, debt, taxes, inheritance, psychological healing, just the idea of vulnerability, right? Now, the North Node in the eighth, this tends to pull you toward deeper emotional honesty and spiritual surrender. Get very honest with yourself. But Jupiter in the first house wants expansion and confidence and personal freedom. As this can create like this subtle tension between wanting to move forward boldly and needing to deal with deeper emotional or financial entanglements. There's somebody who's like, yeah, I would really like to do that, but I have this financial situation going on, right? So you may need to adjust how much you carry for other people, how much you merge financially or emotionally, and where you need clearer boundaries right now. This is also a reminder that true confidence doesn't come from avoiding vulnerability. It's just that is just not a thing. It comes from facing what has power over you and then reclaiming it, reclaiming yourself from it, you know? So we also have the square from Jupiter to Leo and Chiron, right? Your 10th house. We're dealing with Chiron in Taurus, June, July, August. Then he's going to go back into Aries till next spring, and then I'll move back into Taurus for 7 years, right? So this summer is just kind of a little glimpse. I'm going to do a separate video on that, so I don't want to overspeak it. But this is one of the more important challenges of this transit, I want to say. And we just say challenging, like nothing is bad or good, just something to be mindful of. As the 10th house rules career and public reputation and authority and achievement and long-term direction, the long-term status of a marriage, long-term, right? Dealing with other people. And Chiron in that space can reflect wounds around professional worth and recognition and stability and status and feeling valued in the public world. So it could just make you feel you know, like hella insecure over there, when it comes to being able to push forward, in the way that you would really want. And you have to remember though, wherever Chiron is real. Chiron is a centaur. Is psychologically, he is extremely powerful in the chart. Evolutionary astrologers like myself understand that Chiron is really like the most important, we could argue, but in the chart, right? Just because it's like because of Chiron, we make so many choices in our life. And again, I don't want to make it all about Chiron, but Chiron in Taurus is this wound of worth. And what it is, it's this basically saying you're not good enough. You don't have money. You're not capable of making enough money to have the life that you want. You are not, fill in the blank, having to do with like a Taurian idea. You're not able to bring yourself enough stability. You're not able to, blah, 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 right? Do all of these things, right? In any kind of comfortable way. Now, this is what's funny. Not haha funny, but interesting. Even if you have all the money in the world in the bank, you could still experience this energy because you could feel like, yeah, but something could come along and just pull the rug right out from underneath me. That's the thing. But, and this is the big but, okay? It's false narrative. It's false narrative. Of course you can do it. Of course you can. But Chiron comes in when he does this kind of transit in Taurus. Okay, let's go. Let's talk about why do you feel that fear? Why do you feel like you can't do that? Why? And we have to answer those questions, right? Why do we not feel very valued? Why do we feel like we can't have our sense of self-worth appreciated by other people? Why can't we create our own stability in life? And that's what's tricky about Chiron, in Taurus. But having it in the 10th house, it's very connected to career and feeling respected and feeling like, we could do this. So any wounds around that. You may have experienced public setbacks in your life, or public insecurity, or authority wounds, or a sense that your work has not been properly appreciated. Even if you've done quite well for yourself, properly appreciated in your eyes, getting to where you want to be. Now, again, this is not real, but this is just, I want to just give you a heads up that this could be a feeling that comes up this summer. Now, as Jupiter expands your identity and your visibility, these career wounds may surface. So you may feel both ready to be seen and afraid of being judged at the same time. So you may question whether you're even qualified. Are you respected? Are you stable? Are you worthy of leadership, right? As this square can bring professional growth, there's no question, but it may also expose the insecurities that have to be healed before you can fully claim your authority and move forward there, right? There's a lesson here isn't to hide the professional path, right? That feels just good to you. The lesson here is to build your confidence slowly and practically and with a stronger sense of self-worth, and really being clear-eyed about how great you are, and not exaggerating the imperfections that we all have in one way or another. Now, finally, Jupiter in Leo trines Neptune in Aries in your ninth. And this is a beautiful, spiritual, creative, very visionary kind of energy. The ninth house rules higher ed, higher education, philosophy, travel, dealing with foreign land, foreign cultures, publishing, marketing, advertising, teaching, legal matters, any sort of law, legalities, local governance, the larger meaning of life, spirituality, again, religion, organized or otherwise. Did I say that? Is also connected to father energy. So Neptune in Aries in the ninth is dissolving. It's doing some dissolving here. Old beliefs and awakening a lot more of an intuitive and courageous and spiritually guided worldview. So the trine from Jupiter in the first can make you feel inspired and hopeful and creative. It's just a lot more connected to a larger purpose. So this is excellent for teaching, publishing, traveling, studying, spiritual work, creative leadership, sharing your message with a wider audience. Yeah, I mean, this could be a very nice energy here. This would be a year where you believe in yourself in some sort of new way. I know that sounds campy, but I do feel like just for the archetype, your identity is being supported by this larger vision. So you may feel called to follow faith or inspiration or a dream that requires courage for you to just say, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it scared, And just overall for you guys, Jupiter going into your energy begins a major year of personal expansion, identity renewal, super great confidence and visibility and self, just reclaiming yourself. I don't even want to say it's like a new old or old new way, a new old way, right? Just your true self. But it's not happening in isolation, which is why I wanted to do this video. It's reshaping your relationships, and it's waking up private healing and expanding your social world, and it's challenging your career wounds, right? How people see you, and it's just aligning you with a deeper spiritual path. So you're just becoming more fully yourself, but to do that, you may need to stop organizing your identity around other people's comfort and old professional insecurities, if that's a thing for you, or unconscious fears from the past. Okay, my friends. So Leo, I hope that was helpful for you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Virgo rising to a lesser degree, sun and moon. Please watch all three. Jupiter moving into Leo at 0 degrees on June 30th begins a major 12th house cycle for you guys. This is the house of the unconscious, of rest, of retreat, of spiritual healing and closure and solitude and grief and hidden fears, any kind of private work. So aside from these things, like you might be working on a project behind the scenes, very 12th house energy, any sort of behind the scene preparation, and the patterns that just quietly shape your life from beneath the surface, right? That's 12th house is behind everything. So this is it's a deeply internal Jupiter transit. Because Jupiter wants growth and confidence and creativity and heart-centered expansion when he's in Leo, right? It's got to be about the heart, right? But in the 12th house, a lot of that growth happens privately before it becomes visible. So this can be a year of emotional clearing and just spiritual awakening. And I know we throw that term around so much. What does that even mean? You know it when it's happening. You're just more open to understanding that there is more to life, you know, that we are energetic beings and whatever that means to you, but that you're not going to be able to ignore that. But in doing so and processing through all of this idea of retreat and working on your intuition is going to be developing all on its own. Great energy for therapy and any kind of recovery or dream work or just releasing identities that no longer fit. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. If you're struggling with any kind of addiction, beautiful energy to really focus on making that something that's just no longer part of your story. Now, because Jupiter enters Leo at 0 degrees, this does have a vibe of like a new spiritual chapter. So you may not immediately see everything changing externally, but internally something important is beginning. So you may feel called to step back and simplify or rest or heal or prepare quietly for a future chapter that just hasn't fully arrived yet, right? But this can be a powerful time for writing privately, creating something behind the scenes, studying spiritual material, developing your intuition, or working on something that will later become more public. Now, Jupiter in Leo immediately opposes Pluto retrograde and Juno retrograde in Aquarius in your 6th house. And this activates the 12th house, 6th house axis, rest versus work, surrender versus routine, healing versus obligation, the unconscious mind versus the daily body, right? Because that 6th house rules work and service and health, mental, physical, and emotional. It rules co-workers, daily responsibilities. It rules all of our fur babies, our domestic pets, our habits, our schedules, and the systems that structure everyday life, like working out, going to the gym, going to the store. And Pluto retrograde in Aquarius in the 6th suggests deep transformation around your work environment or your health patterns or your stress levels or your routines or your relationship to service. And honestly, for a lot of you, it's a bunch of these things combined. So you may be seeing where your daily life has become just too demanding and controlling and exhausting and psychologically draining. Now, Juno retrograde in there in the 6th brings a review, because it's retrograde, of commitments connected to work and health and caregiving, employment, any kind of duty, any kind of daily obligation, commitment to coworkers. So you may be reassessing what you've promised and what you keep doing out of duty, or whether certain routines are actually even sustainable at this point. So this opposition can bring a major wake-up call around burnout. Like full stop there. You know, Jupiter in the 12th asks for rest, lots of sleep, spiritual protection, emotional release, while Pluto in the 6th is exposing the intensity of what your body and your schedule have been carrying. So you may realize that you just can't keep functioning in the same way without consequences. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean crisis in any way, but it doesn't mean that you're in a life and you're out of routine. They have to come into better alignment. Because if you ignore this, they're going to become a little louder in that way, okay? Now, Jupiter is also connected when he goes into Leo. It's very connected to Mercury retrograde and Hygeia in Cancer in your 11th house. Now, this brings friendships and communities, networks, audiences, social media groups, any kind of group, collaborations, long-term dreams. Um, your goals and gains, like focus on the next 10 to 15 years, money for retirement, all of these things um, into this healing process. I'm thinking about these things and healing them, figuring things out. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Mercury retrograde in Cancer in the 11th suggests, reviewing some friendships or group conversations or community ties or future goals. And so for a lot of you, people from the past can easily resurface. Old hopes may return for reconsideration. You might rethink your role in a community, your relationship to an audience, or the emotional impact of a certain friendship. Now, Hygeia in the 11th adds a healing layer around all of these 11th house things, around social belonging. So you may become more aware of how certain groups affect your nervous system and your emotional health. Some friendships may feel very nourishing for you, while others may feel very draining and overdependent. This transit is asking you to notice which communities support healing and which ones pull you in and just knot you up into this emotional entanglement. Now, for a lot of you, this can also support healing through groups, through spiritual communities, therapy circles, if you're into doing that. It's therapy, yes. You guys will really benefit from therapy in general, but circles would be a very nice energy for you as well. Where you're sharing your problem with someone who shares your problem. Any kind of online community, supportive friendships, or audiences that resonate with your deeper work, right? With what's going on deeper within you. But with Mercury retrograde involved, discernment is important. So not everybody needs to be welcomed back with open arms. Use discernment. Some people are meant to stay in the past. That's just reality, right? So just use your discernment there. Now, Jupiter in Leo sextiling Uranus, Sedna, and Mars in Gemini in your 10th house, which rules career, reputation, leadership, visibility, long-term goals, authority, and your professional direction. There's going to be some focus here. So it's a very interesting combination because Jupiter is working behind the scenes in the 12th house, while Uranus, Sedna, and Mars are activating the public and professional 10th house. It's like the most public house in your chart, right? And so Uranus and Gemini in the 10th can bring sudden career changes or unexpected opportunities or unconventional professional choices. For others of you, it could just be public reinvention or a desire to break free from outdated either career roles, marriage roles, or just where you thought your life was going. It's almost like, whoop, let's change, let's change direction here. I know Mars in Gemini adds ambition and movement and communication and decision making and just busy, busy public life, right? I mean, that's what it does. But Sedna adds this deeper theme around trust and survival, right? And where professional independence may have been shaped by past disappointments of feeling unsupported. So all happening at the same time. Now, the sextile from Jupiter in the 12th to these 10th house planets suggests that private healing supports public reinvention. So you may be preparing for a career shift quietly before announcing it. You may be developing a project in the background, or you may be reworking your professional identity spiritually or creatively or psychologically before the world fully sees it. And this could be excellent, excellent for anything connected to research, writing, planning, spiritual work, healing professions, media teaching, behind the scenes strategy, or developing a public role that just feels more aligned with your inner truth. So career changes may happen quickly, but the wisdom guiding them may come from solitude, intuition, dreams, or just a lot of thought and private reflection. Now, Jupiter quincunxing the North Node retrograde at 0 degrees in Pisces in your 7th house creates an adjustment between your private healing process and your relationship path. So that 7th house rules partnership, marriage, clients, contracts, collaborators, any kind of one-on-one dynamic, including your doctors, including, yeah, I mean, it could just, because a lot of people think 7th house is like, oh, relationship, but it's not only that, it's also your energetic output at work. So it could just simply be that. But the North Node in Pisces in the 7th is pulling you toward more compassionate, spiritually aligned, emotionally sensitive, and intuitive connections, just in general, all kinds of relationships. However, Jupiter in the 12th may require solitude, closure, inner processing, really processing inwardly. So this can create a subtle tension between wanting connection and needing rest. So you may need to adjust your relationship patterns so that compassion does not become self-sacrifice, right? You may also need to recognize where you disappear into other people or situations, where you over accommodate or where you confuse empathy with responsibility, because this quincunx can bring karmic relationship lessons around boundaries, forgiveness, and emotional clarity. Now, for some of you, this can also show the need to just release old relationship attachments before new partnership patterns can rise to the surface, right? So a relationship may require more spiritual honesty, or a client or collaboration, some sort of collaborator dynamic may need adjustment. The larger lesson is learning how to stay connected without abandoning your inner peace. Again, it's all about like not erasing yourself and not allowing yourself to become absorbed into this other person or their needs or the needs of a situation. Now, the square from Jupiter and Leo to Chiron and Taurus in your ninth house is one of the more meaningful growth challenges in this transit. And again, it's just Chiron is only going to be in Taurus for June, July, August, and then he goes back into Aries until next spring. And then he'll dip back in for 7 years. But that ninth house of expansion and belief system and higher education and publishing and marketing and legal matters, lawyers are ninth house. Any sort of local governance. Long distance travel is also ninth house. Religion, organized or otherwise, philosophy. This is the larger meaning to life here. And so Chiron and Taurus in the ninth can reflect wounds around these ninth house things, around faith and trust and education and feeling intellectually or spiritually secure, being believed, you being believed, or feeling safe enough to expand beyond familiar territory, right? Daring to expand your worldview when it comes to whatever, politics, religion, whatever it is, right? There may be some old wound connected to teachers or institutions of any kind, or beliefs or cultural situations or religion or legal matters, just feeling that your worldview was shaken by instability. Okay. Now, I also want to mention that the ninth house is also connected to father energy. So when Chiron in Taurus, is in the ninth house, guys, is being activated, we do want to check on dad's health if your dad is still with you. Okay. Just as a little sidebar. Now, as Jupiter expands the 12th house, hidden fears or spiritual wounds may come to the surface, and you might question what you believe and what you can trust in life, and whether you're supported by something larger, whether your path still has meaning. And this square can feel kind of sensitive because it presses on the idea of faith. What does that actually mean? You might even find yourself like, looking for alternative ways of processing faith and meaning and belonging, but you still just may be coming up empty. But it can be profoundly healing. You may begin releasing old beliefs that were built around fear and scarcity or just self-protection. You may become more willing to trust your intuition instead of needing every answer logically proven before moving forward. Now, finally, for you guys, this Jupiter into Leo energy is trining Neptune and Aries in your eighth house. And this gives the transit a very powerful emotional, psychological, and spiritual depth, because that eighth house rules shared resources, intimacy, debt, taxes, inheritance, trauma healing, trust, grief, energetic merging, change and transformation. Neptune in Aries in the eighth is dissolving old patterns around these things, around fear and intimacy and emotional survival. So it can certainly heighten psychic sensitivity and make energetic boundaries more important, for sure. Like, be careful who you're hanging with, because you become a sponge in this energy. And the trine from Jupiter in the 12th supports deep healing and forgiveness and spiritual release, and a lot of surrender around old pain, which is so amazing. This is a beautiful aspect for therapy, for those of you who are open to it, or just doing shadow work or grief work or spiritual healing or ancestral healing, intuitive development, just emotional detoxing here. So it can release your fear that's been stored just deep in your unconscious for such a long time. And it could just bring compassion into areas where you've been carrying guilt and shame and secrecy or emotional heaviness. So overall, for you guys, Jupiter moving into Leo, beginning a year of very profound inner healing, spiritual preparation, rest, release, just behind the scenes growth. This may not be the loudest outward transit at first, but it could be one of the most important spiritually and psychologically. But you're preparing for a new identity cycle. But first, you are being asked to clear what your body, mind, and spirit no longer carry, right? You have to do it this year because then Jupiter goes into your sign next year, right? And so this is a year of preparation because Jupiter only goes into your sign at once every 12 years. So again, a year of resting more deeply, listening more carefully, protecting your energy, refining your daily life, and trusting the quiet work happening beneath the surface, okay? All right, my friends, I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hi, Libra rising, to a lesser degree, Libra sun and moon, but I say watch all three. Jupiter moving into Leo at 0 degrees on June 30th begins a major 11th house cycle for you. That's the house of friendships and networks and your goals and gains in the next 10 to 15 years of your plan and people who help to open doors for you and future plans. And Jupiter moving into that space can bring a year of social expansion and audience growth for those of you who are creators, or if you have, anything where you have an audience, lots of new friendships, invitations, visibility within groups, and larger opportunities through community. So this is a powerful transit for connecting with people who recognize your gifts and support your confidence and help you move toward a bigger vision for your life. Now, because Jupiter is at 0 degrees, this is a brand new social and future-oriented energy to it. So you may begin entering new cycles, attracting new supporters, or just feeling more hopeful about what's possible. Leo brings creativity, leadership, performance, warmth, visibility. So this could be especially strong for building an audience or teaching, leading a group, creating content, joining some sort of creative community, right? Because Leo is the energy of like you're in front of people, right? You're just stepping into some sort of more visible role within a network. Yeah, it's interesting that it's happening on this axis because yeah, it immediately opposes Pluto retrograde and Juno retrograde in Aquarius in your fifth house. So, which is about personal creativity versus group involvement, romance versus friendship, children versus community, individual self-expression versus audience expectations. But really looking at, and understanding how Pluto retrograde in the fifth is deeply transforming your relationship to romance, to how you do romance and relationships and creativity and pleasure and children and visibility, and just being seen for who you truly are as well. So there may be intense realizations around love and dating and creative power and artistic identity or the way that you express your heart. And Juno retrograde in the fifth suggests a reevaluation of your current romantic commitments or creative partnerships. So your dynamics involving children or obligations connected to passion projects. So as Jupiter expands your 11th house, you may become more visible to a much wider community, but Pluto in the fifth is asking whether your creative expression is authentic or shaped by the need for approval. And this can bring powerful growth through audiences, but also possible tension around compassion and jealousy and romantic complications or creative control. So that opposition, the 11th house also rules technology, okay? Because that's naturally where Uranus rules. So I'm going to paint a little picture for you, okay? This is just as an example. Let's say you go into social media, 11th house, and you're dealing with your children, fifth house, and you're dealing with, whatever relationship you have, and you're feeling different, right? Because Pluto was in there and you're just, Juno's in there and they're retrograde. So you're really rethinking your romantic life, you're rethinking your joy. This doesn't mean that you don't totally love your kids, doesn't mean that you don't love your partner, but you feel like you're changing, becoming a different person. And it's sitting opposite this 11th house. So say you go on social media and you're meeting different people, you're going out there in the world a couple of nights a week and you're meeting people, but you're dealing with this tension. So I'm just throwing it out there. I don't want you to be surprised if you start feeling like, wow, I really kind of want something different for my future, but this is where I am now and needing to navigate that tension between where you are now and where it is that, you're thinking about wanting to go. Hopefully that makes sense there, right? Um, Jupiter is also connected to Mercury retrograde in Hygeia and Cancer in your 10th house. And this brings career and reputation and leadership and just your professional direction of your story, but it's also your long-term goals. It's the status of your marriage. And with Mercury retrograde in Cancer there's a review of everything in that house, whether it's your career plans, your marriage, your public messaging, your professional decisions, conversations with authority figures, where it is that you see yourself going. So you may be rethinking how you're known publicly, how you communicate your work, how you feel about your marriage, whether your current professional path feels truly emotionally aligned. Does your marriage feel emotionally aligned? And Hygeia in the 10th does add a healing layer around public responsibility, professional pressure. So you may become more aware of how career stress affects your body and emotional well-being. Now, the 10th house is also the manifestation of mother energy as well. So there could be this realization how much the stress of mother energy is weighing on you, how the stress of the status of your marriage is weighing on you, right? Um, but there's healing here with Hygeia here. She wants to heal things. She wants to refine things. She wants things to be more sustainable. She wants to create connection here, but we have to be willing to do that. Now, Jupiter in Leo sextiling Uranus, Sedna, and Mars in your ninth, which rules the ninth house, rules higher education, teaching, law, legalities, lawyers, politics, publishing, marketing, long distance travel, foreign land, foreign cultures, wider exposure, your belief systems, connection to the manifestation of father energy as well. It's all the ninth house, okay? So this is excellent for expanding your reach through teaching, publishing, media, travel, education, astrology, spirituality, writing, or intentional connections. Now, Uranus and Gemini in the ninth brings unexpected breakthroughs in beliefs, learning, your worldview, and Mars adds motivation and movement. Sedna adds a deeper layer, though, here around trust and truth, and where old beliefs may have been shaped by just needing to survive, just survival. So the sextile from Jupiter in the 11th to these ninth house planets can bring opportunities through teaching, online audience, publishing platforms, workshops, certifications, spiritual networks, father energy. You may connect with different people from different backgrounds. You may travel more, share your message with a broader audience. I know it's a lot, but I want to give you all the different ways it can manifest. Now, Jupiter quincunxing the North Node retrograde at 0 degrees in Pisces in your sixth house creates an adjustment between your growing social life and your daily routines, your health, your work habits, as well as your responsibilities. Now, that North Node in Pisces in the sixth is pulling you toward a more compassionate, intuitive, and spiritually aligned way of working, as well as caring for your body. But Jupiter in the 11th may increase invitations, social obligations, audience demands, or group involvement. The adjustment is not letting opportunity. The key here is to not let opportunity overwhelm your health, where you're not remembering to take care of yourself, right? Now, you may need to refine your schedule and protect your energy and become a little more selective about which groups or collaborations deserve your time, because not every opportunity is automatically aligned with you, right? This transit asks you to balance expansion with sustainable daily practice, right? And just using your common sense and really taking the temperature of your energy when it comes to all of these things. Now, the square from Jupiter in Leo to Chiron and Taurus in your eighth house is emotionally and financially sensitive, okay? Now, Chiron's going to be in Taurus just for June, July, August. Then he goes back into Aries until next spring. At that point, he'll go back in for 7 years, okay? We're going to get a little taste of this, right, this summer. And the eighth house, just to remind you, rules money and debt, taxes, inheritance. It's shared money, intimacy, vulnerability, grief, trust, psychological healing, emotional entanglements, all of that stuff. But it's blended, right? It's a partner's money. It's also the house of divorce. Okay. I do just want to throw that in because divorce could be deciding to absolutely commit to somebody as well. That is where divorce is as well. So Chiron and Taurus in the eighth can reflect wounds around trust and financial dependency and emotional merging and betrayal and loss and just feeling unsafe in shared resource situations. So as Jupiter expands your eighth house of, expand your 11th house rather, of friendships and groups and your future and your goals and gains, and your networks. All of these 11th house energies may trigger deeper issues around trust and vulnerability. So for some of you, you're thinking about your money for your future and it's like you're just not feeling safe. That could be for some of you. Others of you, if you're meeting new people and you want to just kind of bust out of your situation, there is this challenge having to do with like maybe your finances. So a lot of different things could be coming up. This can manifest a bunch of different ways, but you may realize where you've been afraid to rely on others or where relying on them, where you've done it, but it just hasn't felt safe, it hasn't felt safe for you. So there also may be some financial lessons connected to collaborations and audiences and groups or shared investments. And this square can bring healing, but it requires a lot of honesty about where emotional security and financial security have become all crazy tangled with fear, right? Because that's going to feel very real for you. Now, finally, Jupiter in Leo trines Neptune in Aries in your seventh house. And this is, honestly, I think this is a beautiful relationship and partnership influence. That seventh house rules marriage, commitment, clients. It doesn't have to be connected to a relationship. It could just be your clients, your doctors, any kind of contract that you're involved with, any sort of one-on-one connection. But Neptune in Aries in the seventh is dissolving old relationship patterns and awakening a more spiritually aligned vision of partnership. The trine from Jupiter in the 11th can feel more supportive. It can bring supportive people. It can bring inspired collaborations, the doctors that you need, compassionate allies, connections that feel meaningful or divinely timed. This is very strong for attracting people who resonate with your dreams and your future direction. It can support romantic openness, creative partnerships, client growth, but Neptune still requires discernment. So inspiration is beautiful, clarity is necessary. And I'm going to underscore that because Neptune can also be the energy of the victim, of self-sabotaging behavior. Seventh house, it rules people that we're dealing with. Neptune also deals with disease and dis-ease. And because it's being activated by Jupiter, we want to make sure that the health of the person that we're dealing with as well is good. So again, so many different ways. I know it can be overwhelming how it can manifest, but however it may end up, manifesting in your energy, but just overall and generally speaking, for you guys, Jupiter moving into Leo begins a year of social expansion. For many of you, audience growth. We're just growing your clientele, right? If you have anything like that, friendship renewal, community building, some kind of future vision. Very powerful time to connect with people who see your gifts and help you move forward towards some sort of larger goal. The deeper message here underneath all of this is that your future is expanding, yes, but through people. But the right people will support your authentic creativity, respect your boundaries, and align with life that you're truly looking to build. And whoever's not in like Camp Libra, I just don't see them going the long term. There is a lot of really nice energy for healing any sort of like crooked kind of connections, but everyone's got to be on board. See, we never say any absolutes. Astrology is what's possible, right? That's what the energy is presenting. But everybody's got to show up, in the same way. All right, my friends. So that is what I have for you, my Libra friends. I hope this was helpful in some way. Thanks for hanging with me, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Hi, Scorpio. Scorpio rising to a lesser degree, sun and moon. I say listen to all three. So for you guys, Jupiter moving into Leo at 0 degrees on June 30th begins a major 10th house cycle. This is one of the most public and professionally significant Jupiter transits because the 10th house ruler is all about career and reputation and visibility and achievement and leadership and your status in your public life and the direction that you're known for in the world. But it's also the status of your marriage. It's also your long-term goals because not everybody's working, right? Not everybody is in that space. So it's not only that, it's also the manifestation of mother energy, right? So there's a lot changing here. So Jupiter going into Leo in your 10th can bring a year of expansion. So for many of you, it could bring career expansion and recognition and leadership opportunities, or some kind of increase in public visibility and professional growth, or just a whole new path, Scorpio. You might be, because it's sitting opposite the fourth, and we're going to talk about that, moving. You might be just creating a different journey, a different path for yourself. So this can be a time, though, when you're asked to step into a bigger something, a bigger role, claim more authority, have more agency over your life, promote your work more boldly, or just allow yourself to be seen as someone who has talent and expertise and influence. Leo in the 10th wants you to lead from your heart and stop hiding your light professionally. And because Jupiter is at 0 degrees, the vibe of this energy is like brand new chapter, but for you, it's like brand new public life and future energy. So there's something about your career path, your reputation, your long-term direction that is going to begin shifting quickly. Okay. So you may feel called to launch something, apply for a higher position, teach something, lead, promote yourself, become more visible, take your work more seriously. Jupiter in Leo immediately opposes Pluto retrograde and Juno retrograde in Aquarius in your fourth. So this activates the fourth house, 10th house axis. And, keeping in mind that Jupiter is the landlord of the ninth house, which rules foreign land and foreign travel, sitting in opposition to the fourth, some of you just might be like, I'm just like leaving this country. I'm moving somewhere else. I want to just like leave like far away. I mean, there could be that energy there, but it's activating that axis. So this idea of like home or, your long-term direction, right? And that idea of security. So it could be home versus career, your private life, fourth house, public life, 10th house, family, fourth house versus your ambition, 10th house, emotional security, fourth house versus your professional visibility, or how it is that you're going to roll out the rest of your life, right? And so Pluto retrograde in the fourth is deeply transforming your home life, your family systems, your emotional foundation, your, you know, private psychological world. Obviously, property matters for many of you. Ancestral patterns, right? Letting go of ancestral patterning, right? Things that you've been doing for a long time because it's kind of like how you were raised, or it's a coping mechanism for how you were raised, and you're realizing this, and all of these things are going to just become very obvious, like right in front of you. So there may be these intense realizations around family dynamics or a living situation or childhood conditioning, right? Or the emotional structures that have shaped your sense of safety. Now, with Juno retrograde in the fourth, this suggests a review of commitments connected to home, family, property, parents, marriage, household agreements, your private responsibilities. And as Jupiter expands your 10th, your public life is likely going to grow. But Pluto in the fourth asks whether your emotional foundation can support that growth. Because it's like you want to grow, you have a lot of good ideas, but can you do it, right? You may not be able to pursue a career expansion or go after that path that you're envisioning for yourself while ignoring unresolved family stress or a housing situation, or emotional pressure behind the scenes, right? So this can bring major decisions around work-life balance, relocation, family boundaries, or the role that your private life is playing in either your public success or your ability to have the future that you really want for yourself, right? Now, Jupiter is also connected to Mercury retrograde in Hygeia and Cancer in your ninth house when he ingresses into Leo. And this brings higher education, teaching, publishing, legal matters, travel, spirituality, philosophy, belief systems. It's a manifestation of father energy. Um, Publishing, marketing, advertising. Ninth house is such a big house, right? Because it's actually where Jupiter naturally lives in the chart. So Mercury retrograde in Cancer in the ninth in there is suggesting a review of your larger vision here. Okay, so you likely are going to be rethinking what you believe and what you want to maybe teach or where you want to go or how you want to share your knowledge with a wider audience. This can also involve revisiting educational plans or paths for certifications or publishing projects or legal matters or international connections or even any kind of spiritual belief. Now, Hygeia in the ninth adds a healing layer around these things, around faith and meaning and perspective. So you may become more aware of how your beliefs affect your health and your emotional well-being. So if old fear-based beliefs have limited your confidence professionally, this transit can help you begin healing them, okay? It may also support healing through study, spiritual practice, travel, teaching, just reconnecting with some kind of philosophy that you feel nourished by, okay? Now, Jupiter in Leo sextiling Uranus, Sedna, and Mars, all in Gemini, all in your eighth house. The eighth house is big for you because that's where you guys naturally live, right? That's the home of Scorpio. The eighth house rules shared resources and debt and taxes and loans and inheritance and business investments and mortgages and intimacy and trust and vulnerability, and psychological healing and just deep transformation, right? So this is a powerful energy because professional expansion or whatever longer term path that you're trying to manifest for yourself may be tied to financial restructuring or shared resources changing, something changing there. And Uranus and Gemini in the eighth can bring sudden developments involving loans and taxes and settlements and commissions and investments, grants, could get a grant, partner income, debt, or some kind of business funding. Mars adds an urgency and movement to it. So there may be a need to make decisions rather quickly around shared money or financial commitments. Sedna does add a deeper theme around trust and survival and abandonment and the need to be super careful about where you place financial or emotional reliance. So we have all of these things combined. So it's pretty intense. And the sextile from Jupiter in the 10th to these eighth house energies can create opportunities for sure through investors, shared ventures, business partnerships, institutional support, commissions, getting commissions for something that you did, some kind of funding. You could be selling a property, deep psychological work that can strengthen your career path. It can also suggest that career growth is connected to facing fears around dependency and power and money, vulnerability. All these things need to be looked at. Okay. Now, Jupiter quincunxing the North Node, that's retrograde at 0 degrees in Pisces in your fifth house. It creates an adjustment between your career expansion and creative, romantic, or, those personal happiness. elements. What else is the fifth house? Your children, your romantic connections, how you do relationship, pleasure, it's performance, it's passion, it's fertility, it's authentic self-expression. It's feeling very much yourself, is that fifth house energy. And the North Node in Pisces in the fifth is pulling you towards a softer, more intuitive, more creative form of joy and expression. It's asking you to make space for inspiration and art and love and children and play and just heart-centered creativity. But Jupiter in the 10th house can increase professional demands, visibility, ambition, responsibilities necessary to restructure this new path that you're walking on. So this quincunx suggests that you may need to adjust your career direction or the direction that you would ideally like to go in so that it doesn't crowd out your joy. You have to be careful there, overworking for what? We're living in a place that's too expensive for what? You're not going to be able to enjoy your life that way, right? So trying to find balance there. But a lot of you are likely going to be asking if your professional path still allows you to create, or, are you making room for love and pleasure and children, real love? Is your public role aligned with your heart, right? Now, this aspect can be subtle, but it's so important. Success cannot come at the expense of your soul's need for happiness, joy, inspiration, right? Now, the square from Jupiter in Leo to Chiron and Taurus in your seventh house is one of the more sensitive relational themes in this transit. I'm not going to lie, Chiron is in Taurus, June, July, August. Then he goes back into Aries until next spring. And then he's going to dip back into Taurus and he'll be in there for 7 years. So we're going to get a little flavor for Chiron and Taurus this summer. And, this can reflect wounds around partnership and stability and trust and loyalty and feeling valued by others or feeling safe in committed relationships. Now, as Jupiter expands your 10th house of career and visibility, relationship wounds may surface here. Could be a partner, a client, a collaborator, or a significant other. Could be your spouse or just somebody that you're in an important relationship with. They may react to your growth and your visibility or your ambition, and you may also confront your own fear that professional success could destabilize your relationship. Also, just choosing a different path in life can destabilize your established relationship. So the square can bring healing, but it requires honesty and really getting real honest with yourself. Are your partnerships supporting your growth? Are you choosing relationships that genuinely value your worth and what it is that you bring to the table? Are you over compromising either professionally or personally just to maintain the peace and status quo, especially out of fear? For a lot of you, I can say that this transit can bring an important client or contract issue, or relationship issue, right? It could bring relationship conversations around time, attention, money, emotional availability. These are all things that need to be discussed because it seems like there's an imbalance there. Okay. Now, Jupiter is also trining Neptune in Aries in your sixth house. This is a supportive influence for sixth house energy. So your daily work environment, your health, your service, your daily routines, your spiritual alignment, your everyday life. So that's it. Sixth house rules employment, of course, employment, your coworkers, though, habits, wellness. This is practical systems that support life. And Neptune in Aries in the sixth is dissolving old work patterns and inviting a more inspired, intuitive, or spiritually aligned approach to your daily life. This could even be very connected to you not or making an adjustment in how you treat your body on the day to day. Now, the trine from Jupiter in the 10th can support career growth through service, through health related work, spiritual work, creative work, leadership, and some sort of helping field. So, sort of more inspired professional routine. Um, it could also um, just increase your peace and your ability your ability to be responsible, to kind of like show up in life and be super responsible as you are navigating this next chapter of your life, right? Because it can also just, align with your daily habits and your larger calling. If you're stepping into more visibility, your routines support that visibility. Your body, your schedule, your work habits, they're all part of the success structure, right? Not separating how you treat your body, the stress that you're under, and your future. They're all very interconnected, right? In that space. Um, and this is one of the most important career periods in a 12-year cycle. I can tell you, it's not going to be back around here for another 12 years. So this is really powerful for a lot of you. But I do want to say that the chart shows that career growth is deeply connected to home transformation, relationship healing, financial restructuring, and daily life alignment, right? This could be quite nice for, a lot of you are moving, but maybe you're going to use this energy to like change something in your home. Maybe you're going to start working from home, but whatever it is, you're being called to expand your life. But that role and that thing has to be supported by a stronger emotional foundation than the one that you've been actively exercising. Healthier partnerships, clearer shared resource agreements, and a life structure that can actually sustain your success. Okay, my friends. So I hope this was helpful in some way. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hi, Sagittarius rising to a lesser degree, sun and moon, but I say watch all three. Jupiter moving into Leo at 0 degrees on June 30th begins a major ninth house cycle for you guys. It's one of the most natural and expansive Jupiter placements because the ninth house is associated with higher learning, wisdom, teaching, publishing, marketing, advertising, travel, spirituality, religion, philosophy, lawyers, legal matters, international connections, and just the meaning of life, right? For you guys, it's especially important because Jupiter is your chart ruler and he lives in the ninth house. You're at home, he's at home, everybody's happy, right? Now, when Jupiter changes signs, your overall life direction shifts whenever he does this, right? So with Jupiter entering Leo in your ninth house, this next year can open doors connected to ninth house things. So publishing, marketing, advertising, education, travel, teaching, writing, mentorship, spiritual study, astrology, media, broadcasting, sharing your knowledge in some way with a wider audience. So this is a year of expanding your vision, but also reclaiming your confidence in what you do know. Okay. Now, because Jupiter enters at 0 degrees, this is a feeling of a brand new chapter. So you may feel called to study something seriously, right? Or teach something publicly, or launch a course, or publish work, or travel, or pursue a certification. Some of you may even be deciding to return back to school. Others of you, for you, it just may be about reconnecting with a belief system that gives you hope. Leo adds creativity and courage and obviously performance. Leo is the sign of the entertainer. It's also the sign of the energy with the most heart. So this is not only about learning, it's about becoming visible as someone with wisdom to share. Now, Jupiter in Leo immediately opposes Pluto retrograde and Juno retrograde in Aquarius in your third house. And this activates the third house, ninth house axis. Everyday communication versus higher wisdom, local life versus broader horizons, facts versus belief, the immediate environment versus the bigger picture, right? The third house is also siblings in there, right? your beliefs, versus a situation with a sibling. Now, Pluto retrograde in Aquarius in that third is deeply transforming how it is that you think. And we've been speaking about this for over a year now. It's transforming how you think and speak and teach and write and process information and just in general communicate with the people around you. So there may be intense changes involving, as I just mentioned, siblings, neighbors, your local community, some sort of short trips or writing projects, media, or daily communication patterns. You may be realizing that your words carry more power than you previously understood. Now, Juno retrograde in the third suggests a review of commitments involving communications and contracts and teaching and writing and siblings and local obligations or agreements. So you may be reconsidering how much mental energy you give to certain conversations and people and projects. Some agreements may need to be revised so that, they're more in alignment with you, because you're realizing that a lot of these energies are just no longer matching your larger vision and who you are, right? Your worldview. And this opposition can create tension between your desire to expand into bigger opportunities and your need to handle like daily communication and paperwork and local responsibilities, or just conversations that require care, your regular comings and goings each day, right? Now, it can also bring ideological conflict or intense discussions around truth. Now, the lesson is to speak here with wisdom and not just intensity. So you may be called to refine your message so that it can reach more people without becoming scattered or reactive, right? Some of you may be having that experience. But Jupiter is also in this ingress connected to Mercury retrograde initially and Hygeia in Cancer in your 8th house. So this brings shared money and debt and taxes and loans, inheritance, investments, intimacy, trust, vulnerability, trauma healing, psychological transformation, all into your story. So that Mercury retrograde in Cancer in the 8th suggests a review of final financial agreements or shared resources or emotional entanglements, private conversations, or unresolved psychological material. You may need to revisit taxes, debt, loan, insurance, a partner's income, a contract, some sort of financial support. Now, emotionally, this can bring up old fears around trust and loss, dependency, or just vulnerability. And it's bringing it back to the surface so that it could be healed. Now, Hygeia in the 8th adds a very strong healing layer around intimacy and shared resources. Your body may respond to stress involving money and trust or emotional merging. This is a period where deep healing may be needed around what you share or what you owe or what you receive, and where you feel safe enough to be vulnerable. Now, Jupiter in Leo sextiling Uranus, Sedna, and Mars, all in Gemini in your 7th house, which rules marriage, committed partnership, your clients, your contracts, any collaborators, and one-on-one relationships. This is a major partnership signature, as we could say, because Uranus and Gemini in the 7th can bring sudden changes in relationships, unexpected clients, unconventional partnerships, new collaborations, or surprising developments with a significant other. Okay, with your spouse or even a very close friend. Now, Mars in Gemini adds momentum and conversation. Mars does add conflict, does add attraction, negotiation, and movement. Sedna adds deeper themes here around trust and abandonment and betrayal, or the need to be more conscious of who you allow into close partnership. Now, the sextile from Jupiter in the 9th to the 7th house planets can bring growth through relationships connected to teaching or travel or publishing or education or spirituality, legal matters, or just any sort of cross-cultural connection here. So a partner, a client, a collaborator, or mentor may help open a door. You may also attract people, right, during this energy who challenge your worldview and just push you to think more broadly. So this can be excellent for consulting or client-based work or teaching partnerships or anything connected to legal support or publishing collaboration or relationship growth through shared learning. But with Mars and Uranus in the seventh, relationships may move quickly and conversations may be intense, and you will need flexibility and clear communication. Now, Jupiter quincunxing the North Node retrograde at 0 degrees in Pisces in your fourth house creates an adjustment between your desire for expansion and your emotional foundation. And remember, the fourth house rules home, family, property, roots, parents, ancestry, your private life, as well as emotional security. Now, the North Node in Pisces in the fourth is pulling you toward deeper emotional softness, spiritual grounding, family healing, and just a more peaceful private life. But Jupiter in the ninth house wants movement. It wants travel. It wants to learn and teach and broaden its horizon. So this can create a subtle tension here between going out into the world and tending to what needs to be healed at home. So you may need to adjust your plans so they don't disconnect you from your emotional needs. Now, this could also bring questions up about, for a lot of you, about relocation, about home responsibilities and family needs and property matters, and whether your living situation supports the larger life that you're trying to build. Now, the square from Jupiter in Leo to Chiron and Taurus in your sixth is one of the more practical and sensitive challenges of this transit. The sixth house rules work, health, routines, responsibilities, daily responsibilities, your habits, your physical body, the maintenance of your physical body, exercising, eating right, all those good things, right? Now, Chiron in there in Taurus can reflect wounds around work stability, health security, usefulness, productivity, feeling valued in labor, all those things. And as Jupiter expands your ninth house, you may become more excited about travel and study and teaching and publishing of bigger opportunities, but your body and your schedule may need more care because this square can expose where daily life is not sustainable. So you may need to heal patterns of either overwork or undercharging or overserving or just carrying too many responsibilities. Health routines may need attention, especially if stress or travel or work obligations or mental pressure are affecting your body. So this aspect asks you to make expansion practical. So you can absolutely grow and teach and travel and pursue larger opportunities. You can do all that stuff, but your routine must support the body that carries you there. Okay. Seriously. Okay. Now, finally, Jupiter in Leo, trining Neptune in Aries in your fifth. This is a beautiful, creative, romantic, and spiritually inspired influence. That fifth house rules, as we mentioned, creativity, your joy, children, romance, pleasure, passion projects, or your own business, fertility, anything that's involved in like heart-centered expression, right? Neptune in Aries in the fifth is just awakening a more intuitive, imaginative, and spiritual inspired relationship with creativity and joy. So the trine from Jupiter in the ninth can bring creative inspiration through travel, teaching, spirituality, education, writing, or a larger mission, right? This is so good for those of you who are artists, if you're a teacher, performer, writer, spiritual creator, astrologer, excellent for those of you who study, teach astrology. Anyone sharing wisdom through a creative form, really nice. This can also bring some romantic idealism, right? Because fifth house is that, falling in love, love affairs, romance, right? It's just beautiful, right? It could also bring spiritual connection with children or a renewed desire to just create from the heart, but it does support inspiration. But Neptune's in the house, so we have to focus on grounding ourselves, right? Because Neptune rules the bottomless ocean. How do we ever feel grounded in that? It's not possible. So we have to build ourselves some sort of makeshift something, right? Because, the dream is powerful, great, but it's going to need structure to become real, right? We can't just live in like the la la fairyland of, the dream. How's it going to happen, right? So overall for you guys, said Jupiter going into Leo begins this major year of expansion just through all of these wonderful, like Saggy Jupiterian things like learning and teaching and travel and publishing and spirituality and just these bold new horizons. And since Jupiter rules your chart, this transit can strongly influence your confidence, your direction, and your sense of possibility, right? Um, but the deep idea here is that your world is getting bigger. But your words, relationship, your home life, your health, your daily routines, these all have to evolve with it. So this is a year to follow the larger vision while staying grounded enough to actually have it. Okay, my friends, I hope that was helpful in some way. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hi, Capricorn. Capricorn rising to a lesser degree, sun and moon. Jupiter moving into Leo at 0 degrees begins a major eighth house cycle for you guys. And that's the house of shared resources, debt, taxes, loans, inheritance, settlements, intimacy, trust, vulnerability, psychological transformation, energetic merging, grief, and deep healing. This is not light or surface level Jupiter transit for you guys. It's not. Jupiter in Leo wants growth. He wants confidence and courage and creative self-expression. But in the eighth house, that growth comes through emotional honesty, financial restructuring, and deeper psychological awareness. So for many of you, this can bring a year where you're asked to look more closely at what you share, what you owe, what you receive, what you're afraid to depend on, and where you need to reclaim power from financial or emotional entanglements because you've been burnt in the past. And that's just the way it is, right? In different ways, and maybe it was a circumstantial kind of thing, whatever, it doesn't matter. That's what your energy is going to be processing now. Now, because Jupiter enters Leo at 0 degrees, this begins a new chapter it's just like this new chapter vibe around shared money and intimacy and trust and transformation. So there may be developments involving a partner's income, right? Where they come into some sort of financial situation. Um, if it's got nothing aspecting it, or if it's got something good aspecting it, it'll be fabulous. If it is a challenging aspect to it, it could be a little rougher, right? That's this is not a personal reading. But I just want you to be mindful of that, paying attention to your chart. But there could also be some developments around business funding or loans or taxes, insurance, inheritance, investments, commission, debt repayment, or financial support in some way. So emotionally, this can bring a deeper desire for closeness as well, on the relationship angle, but only if connection feels honest, loyal, and safe, right? In the eighth house, Jupiter energy in there as well. Excellent for those of you who are astrologers as well. Okay, growing that energy as well, because the eighth house does rule astrology. Now, Jupiter in Leo immediately opposes Pluto and Juno retrograde in Aquarius in your second house as soon as he moves into that eighth. So this activates the second house, eighth house axis, which would be, again, like your money versus shared money, your personal resources versus someone else's, people's personal resources, your self-worth versus dependency, ownership versus merging, right? And that Pluto retrograde in the second is already transforming your relationship with money, income, security, values, and self-worth. So you may be questioning old survival patterns or financial habits or pricing or possessions, or just the way that you even define stability. And maybe you're doing a little bit of all of those things. And with that Juno retrograde in the second, this suggests a review, sees retrograde, of commitments connected to income, financial agreements, self-worth, and what you've been loyal to for the sake of security, you know? And just looking at what all of that actually even means. Now, as Jupiter expands the eighth house, shared financial matters may become bigger, but Pluto in the second asks whether those agreements truly support your value. You may need to renegotiate debts, contracts, business partnerships, marriage finances, or financial obligations. This is a powerful time to reclaim financial authority or stop allowing fear, guilt, or obligation to determine your worth, right? Now, Jupiter is also connected to Mercury retrograde and Hygeia and Cancer in your seventh house. This brings marriage and partnership and clients, contracts, collaborators, and any kind of one-on-one relationship directly into the story. Okay. The Mercury retrograde and Cancer in the seventh suggests revisiting relationship conversations, client agreements, contracts, or unresolved partnerships and dynamics, in the dynamic of your relationship. So a partner or someone that you're collaborating with somehow may bring up an emotional issue connected to money or trust or security or shared obligation. There may be a need to renegotiate terms or clarify expectations or revisit a decision involving a relationship. Now, Hygeia in the seventh does add a healing layer, right, to the partnership contract realm. You may become more aware of how relationship dynamics affect your health, affect your nervous system, and your emotional well-being. Certain partnerships may feel nurturing while others feel draining and destabilizing. And this transit asks you to notice whether your closest relationships support healing or do they intensify your stress. And it's going to be very obvious. Okay. It's not even going to be like an in-between. Now, Jupiter and Leo sextiling Uranus, Sedna, and Mars in Gemini in your sixth house, which rules work and health and routines and daily responsibilities and your pets and habits and things that just keep our day-to-day going. Now, this sextile does suggest changes in work and daily routines that can support deeper financial and emotional transformation within you. So Uranus and Gemini in the sixth can bring sudden changes in your employment or your schedule or your work methods or sudden changes in the people you work with, your coworkers, or even just your health routines. Now, Mars adds urgency here and productivity and activity. So there's all like this, come on, let's go, let's change, let's move, right? And then Sedna adds this deeper vibe of, and this theme around exhaustion and survival, and when daily life may have just been feeling very unsupported, and you can't not see that. So this could be a great energy for changing all those systems, changing your work system, improving productivity, creating some sort of new income related routine, addressing a health issue, or taking practical steps to manage debt, taxes, shared resources, or financial obligations. The thing is, though, here, this can make your daily life feel super busy. And your nervous system is very fragile right now. So it's going to need more care, especially if financial or relationship situations are adding pressure to all of those things. Okay. So just be mindful of that. Don't forget to rest where you can and exercise and eat well. There's a lot of value in those things when you're going through a transit like this. Now, Jupiter quincunxing the North Node retrograde at 0 degrees in Pisces in your third creates an adjustment between deeper financial and emotional transformation and the way that you communicate, you think, you plan, you teach, you handle your daily life, your daily information, right? Is that North Node in Pisces in the third is pulling you towards a softer, more intuitive, more compassionate space when it comes to communication. So it's allowing you to trust that inner knowing without needing to control every little detail mentally, you know. But Jupiter in the eighth may bring intense financial or emotional topics that require practical conversations and vulnerability. So it might be not to, oh, this feels good, because there is vulnerability involved, but the energy is available to have a really good, open, and honest conversation, because you may need to adjust how you talk about money and intimacy and fear and debt and trust. You may also just need to stop overthinking what needs to be felt. Sometimes they just feel it, right? This quincunx can bring important conversations with siblings, neighbors, your clients, partners, or just people in your local environment, especially around shared responsibilities or emotional truth. Now, the square from Jupiter in Leo to Chiron in Taurus in your fifth house touches creativity and falling in love and love affairs and romance and children and heart-centered self-expression and your vitality. So Chiron and Taurus in the fifth can reflect wounds around feeling creatively valued, romantically secure, loved, chosen, just safe enough to enjoy life. And there may be an old pain connected to children or dating or artistic confidence or pleasure or feeling worthy of attention. And as Jupiter expands your eighth house, deeper emotional material may be stirred around intimacy and vulnerability. And this can affect romance and creativity or the ability to relax into joy. Now, financial stress or shared resource issues may also intersect with children and dating or dating, fertility, right? Should we or shouldn't we have a baby, creative projects, or pleasure. Now, this square is asking you not to let fear or debt or emotional heaviness or even financial entanglements rob you of your happiness. Healing may come from reclaiming pleasure and creativity and love, and just love things that you're allowed to experience, even while this larger transformation is unfolding, just what do you love to do? Just remembering to do just a little bit of that. Now, Jupiter in Leo is also trining Neptune in Aries in your fourth house, right? It's an angular house. It's the deepest house in the chart. And this brings a beautiful spiritual and emotional healing influence to home, family, ancestry, property, and your private inner foundation. Now, Neptune in Aries in the fourth is dissolving old family patterns and reshaping your relationship to home, roots, as well as your emotional security. Now, the trine from Jupiter in the eighth can support ancestral healing, family forgiveness, emotional release, trauma work, and just deeper compassion around private pain. Now, this can also help with shared resources connected to home or family. Things like mortgages or inheritance or property support or just family financial matters in one way. Now, spiritually, this is very powerful for clearing old emotional residue and just clearing a more peaceful inner foundation for yourself. But overall, Capricorn, Jupiter is entering Leo, beginning a year of deep financial and emotional and psychological transformation for you. They're all kind of connected. That shared money, intimacy, debt, trust, and vulnerability, those become major areas of growth. This is a transit that can help you reclaim and renegotiate financial obligations, heal relationship dynamics, and just release old fears. So I hope all of your partners win the lotto or make some sort of really good investment there, or you make a really smart investment in the stock market is also eighth house. But the deeper message of this transit is that true security is not only about what you own or control, it's also just about learning what can be shared safely, what needs to be released, and where you're ready to just transform any kind of fear into a strength. So I hope that was helpful in some way. Thank you for hanging out with me. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Hi, Aquarius. Now, for you guys, Jupiter is moving at 0 degrees and into your seventh house. So this is one of the most relationship-oriented Jupiter transits because the seventh house does rule marriage and committed partnership. It's also clients and contracts and collaborators and business alliances. It's also your doctors and just any sort of significant one-on-one dynamic. Now, Jupiter moving into Leo in your seventh can bring major growth through relationships. So this may manifest as a new partnership or strengthened commitments, important contracts, client expansion, increased visibility through collaboration, or a desire for a more meaningful, heart-centered connection. Now, Leo in the seventh wants relationships that feel alive and passionate and loyal and expressive and emotionally generous. And because Jupiter is at the 0 degrees, this marks the beginning of an entirely new relational chapter. Well, it's the first one in 12 years it's like this. So something about the way that you relate to others is changing profoundly. You may become more open to partnership, more visible within relationships, or more aware that certain connections are meant to help you grow into a fuller version of yourself. However, Jupiter in Leo immediately opposes that Pluto and Juno retrograde in Aquarius in your first house. And this activates that first house, seventh house axis, which is self versus partnership, independence versus compromise, right? Identity versus merging. So the Pluto retrograde in your energy in the first is already transforming your identity, your personality, your appearance, your confidence, just the way you move through life. So you may feel yourself becoming more psychologically deeper, less willing to tolerate superficiality, and just more determined to live authentically. Now, Juno retrograde in the first house suggests a reevaluation of personal identity within commitments. So you may be questioning who you have to become in relationships, and whether certain partnerships still allow you to be fully yourself, right, at the end of the day. And then comes a larger question like, who are you anyway, right? Because that's going to be another thing, realizing who you actually are and then seeing where you fit into everything. And as Jupiter expands the seventh house, relationships become much larger and more important. Now, Pluto in the first asks whether you're losing yourself in the process. So this can become, this can be like a real powerful thing, right? This can bring it's powerful realization, but at the same time, it can bring a very powerful attraction, major relationship developments, and important collaborations, but it can also expose power struggles and imbalance and fear of surrendering too much autonomy, right? For the sake of a situation. So you may notice that the more you evolve personally, the more your relationships must evolve too. So some connections are going to be deepening dramatically, while others just may no longer fit the person that you're becoming. Now, Jupiter is also connected to Mercury retrograde in Hygeia in Cancer in your sixth at the time of this ingress. So this brings work and health and daily routines and schedules and service and habits and nervous system wellness into the relationship story. Right, brings it in there because Mercury retrograde in Cancer in the sixth suggests a review of work systems and schedules and your health routine and your daily communication pattern. So you may be rethinking how you structure your life and how your routines affect your emotional well-being. So conversations involving work or health may need revisiting as well. Now, Hygeia in the sixth strongly emphasizes healing, especially involving stress or exhaustion, emotional burnout, anything about connected to the digestion, your nervous system regulation, or just the emotional impact of work environments. Now, this transit asks you to notice whether your daily life supports your relationships or drains your ability to connect meaningfully. Now, for you guys, relationships may flourish more when routines become healthier and less chaotic. There may also be important conversations involving work-life balance within a partnership. Now, Jupiter and Leo sextiles Uranus, Sedna, and Mars in Gemini in your fifth house. And the fifth house rules romance, falling in love, love affairs, children, pleasure, joy, performance, It's a performance house. It's a passion project house. I think I said dating already. Fertility, authentic self-expression. This is a very exciting. Oh, it's also the house of the entrepreneur, the energy of the entrepreneur, so starting your own business. But this is very exciting and very highly creative influence. Uranus and Gemini in the fifth can bring, well, first of all, for some of you, a sudden romantic development. Others of you, unexpected creative inspiration, unconventional dating experiences. Which you'll be into it, or rapid just shifts involving children or artistic projects, or maybe like a combination of those things. Remember, Uranus is going to be in there for the next almost 8 years, really. So we have that energy in there. But he's going to start getting comfortable in Gemini, so we're really going to start to feel a lot of change. Now, we also have Mars in Gemini that adds a lot of flirtation and movement and action and communication and intensity. But Sedna is in there, and Sedna always adds this deep emotional theme surrounding trust and vulnerability and creative confidence and old romantic wounds. Okay. Now, the sextile from Jupiter in the seventh to these fifth house planets suggests that relationships may become catalysts for creativity and self-expression. So romantic connections may feel exciting and intellectually stimulating and emotionally awakening. Beautiful. Creative partnership can thrive. This is so good for collaborative artistic work. Anything connected to teaching or media projects or writing or performance or social media creativity or building something expressive with another person. Very, very good for like online dating, by the way. Very good. However, Mars and Uranus can also make romantic dynamics fast-moving and or unpredictable. So attraction may happen quickly, but emotional clarity is still important. So you just want to make sure that you're not getting too swept up in things, because there's a lot of energy in that part. So, definitely like hit the apps, guys, if you're looking to date, or be social, anything out there with friends as well. There's like a lot of really good, like meeting new people kind of energy there. Now, Jupiter quincunxing the North Node retrograded 0 degrees in Pisces in your second house creates an adjustment between your partnership growth and your evolving relationship with money. Also your self-values or second house, your self-worth, your security. And the North Node in Pisces in the second is pulling you toward a softer, a more spiritually aligned relationship with self-worth, being kinder to yourself, giving yourself some grace, for goodness sake. It could also just add a softer quality to your financial stability as well. But Jupiter in the seventh may bring major relationship developments that require compromise, negotiation, and shared planning, right? That's okay. It's about compromise, right? So you may need to adjust how much you give financially or emotionally in relationships. This can also bring important conversations about money, values, pricing, if you have your own business, support, or financial independence within partnerships. Now, the deeper lesson is learning that healthy connection should not require abandoning your own worth of security, right? Your own worth, your own security, your own sense of self should not involve that. So the square from Jupiter in Leo to Chiron and Taurus in your fourth house is one of the more emotionally sensitive themes in the chart. Remember, Chiron is going into Taurus just for the summer, June, July, August, and then once September hits, he goes back into Aries until next spring, at which point he'll go back into Taurus for the next 7 years. But right now, for this summer, it's going to be in Taurus, it's going to be in the fourth house, which rules home, family, roots, emotional foundation, your parents, property, ancestry, your private life. So Chiron and Taurus in the fourth can reflect wounds involving emotional safety, family stability, home life, childhood conditioning, or feeling truly secure. And as Jupiter expands the seventh house, relationship developments may trigger deeper emotional vulnerabilities connected to trust, safety, and belonging. So a partnership may bring up an unresolved family dynamic or fears around emotional dependency. Some of you may realize that you've protected yourself emotionally for so long that intimacy itself just feels so unfamiliar and so not comfortable. Others of you may face decisions involving living situations, marriage, property, or family responsibilities where there's just going to have to be some working out. Because this square asks you to heal the part of yourself that equates vulnerability with danger. And relationships can only deepen to the degree that emotional safety is allowed to exist internally. Okay. And finally, Jupiter in Leo is trining Neptune in Aries in your third house. And this is a beautiful influence for communication and writing and speaking and teaching and siblings and learning, media, social connections, emotional understanding, extended family. Neptune in Aries in the third is very connected to right now. It's desiring this dissolution, this dissolving of old communication patterns and just waking up more intuitive, imaginative, and just a spiritually guided voice, you know. The trine from Jupiter in the seventh can support meaningful conversations and an emotionally resonant type of partnership, creative connection, teaching, writing, great for podcasting, any kind of media work or counseling or collaborative projects involving communication. This can make relationships feel mentally and spiritually inspiring. So you may attract people who understand your mind in a deeper way, which is such a welcomed energy by you guys, right? Conversations may feel healing and even visionary or creatively stimulating in some way. It also supports diplomacy and emotional intelligence in communication, right? High EQ, very important there. However, Neptune still requires discernment. We always have to remember that because Neptune rules the bottomless ocean, right? How could we ever feel grounded in the bottomless ocean? We can't. We have to rig ourselves a little something something to feel grounded in that Neptunian energy. So just remember that not every emotionally compelling conversation is automatically clear or grounded. Boundaries and clarity remain super important, especially in romantic and or business uh, agreements or a conversation. So generally speaking, for you guys, Jupiter moving into Leo begins a major year of relationship growth, partnership expansion, collaboration, and interpersonal transformation. This could be one of the most important periods for marriage, contracts, clients, romantic development, or just a very meaningful one-on-one connection. But your chart also makes it clear that relationships are acting as mirrors for your own identity evolution, Aquarius. Okay, so as you become more authentic and emotionally honest and aware of your worth, your partnerships must evolve alongside you. So the deeper message of this transit is that true partnership should not diminish who you are. It should help reveal more of it. Okay, my friends. So that is what I have for you for this Jupiter transit. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for hanging with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Pisces. Pisces rising to a lesser degree, sun and moon. Jupiter moving into Leo at 0 degrees begins a major sixth house cycle for you. And the sixth house, just to remind you, connected to your daily work environment, your health, your daily routines, daily responsibilities, your pets, all your fur babies are in there. Your organization, practical systems that just keep your life functioning well on the day to day. Now, Jupiter moving into Leo in that house can bring expansion around employment, your workload, health routines, productivity, your daily responsibilities, busy, busy. This may be a year when work becomes busier or a new job opportunity shows up or your schedule grows in one way or another, you're just taking on more stuff. Now, Leo does add leadership and creativity and visibility, very connected to performance. So it's not just about doing more, it's about bringing more heart and more confidence and more creative authority into your everyday workspace. Now, because Jupiter is entering at 0 degrees, this marks the new beginning of a cycle in how you structure your day-to-day life. So you may feel ready to improve your habits or organize your schedule differently or care for your body more consistently or just build a work routine that reflects more authentically who it is that you're becoming. This could be so good for developing a healthier rhythm, improving wellness practices, you know what I mean? Like exercising, maybe eating a better diet, or some of you, maybe you're just changing your work environment. Some of you may be stepping into a more visible service role as well. It's very Virgoian, right? Now, Jupiter in Leo immediately, as soon as he ingresses into Leo, immediately opposes Pluto retrograde and Juno retrograde in the sign of Aquarius in your 12th house. So this activates the 6th house, 12th house axis. So this is like work, 6th house versus rest, 12th house, responsibility, 6th house versus surrender, 12th house, right? The body, right? Very connected, 6th house, very connected to the body, 12th house, the unconscious mind, right? Daily service, 6th house, spiritual release, 12th house, right? And that Pluto retrograde in the 12th is already actively, deeply transforming your hidden fears, grief, subconscious patterns, private struggles, old emotional residue that just doesn't belong in there anymore, right? Juno retrograde in the 12th does suggest a review of invisible commitments, right? Obligations that you carry quietly, sacrifices that no one sees, private emotional loyalties or patterns of overgiving behind the scenes, right? And as Jupiter expands your 6th house, your daily life may become busier, but Pluto in that 12th warns against ignoring exhaustion and burnout or unconscious stress. Now, I've shared with you guys, I am a Pisces rising in my secondary progress chart. I will tell you, I am resonating with this and also with June's energy even more than my Capricorn rising and my Gemini sun energy, right? As we all may be realizing that certain work patterns are connected to deeper fears around being useful and needed or in control, right? I mean, I'm always working. That's my Capricorn rising. I love to work. I love, love, love to work, right? But then I have all these other things, responsibilities, right? Just like a lot of you. So it's like, hold on a second. It's like we can't keep growing over here and not balancing it out over here. So really, we're being asked to create routines that support healthier, um, healthier routines for ourselves and not trapping ourselves in survival mode either, because that's so not good. Now, Jupiter is also connected to Mercury retrograde and Hygeia in Cancer in the 5th house, as soon as this ingress happens. So it's definitely giving a flavor and an energy, right, to how we're going to be experiencing it this year. And this brings creativity and romance and pleasure and joy and children and passion projects and lots of self-expression into the story. Now, Mercury retrograde in Cancer in the 5th does suggest revisiting 5th house things, creative ideas, romantic conversations, any matter involving children or old dreams connected to joy, especially ones that are connected to self-expression. So you may return to a project that you once loved or reconsider how much space you make for happiness, just having fun. Hygeia in the 5th adds this healing through creativity and play and art and love and just reconnecting to that inner child, because that's that 5th house energy, just what makes you feel more emotionally alive. Now, for you guys, this is important because the 6th house can become overly focused on duty. This is what I have to do and Mercury retrograde and Hygeia in the 5th remind you that Wellness is not only about work, food, exercise, or schedules, right? Joy is also has to be part of that mix as well. Now, Jupiter in Leo sextiling at the same time, Uranus, Sedna, and Mars in Gemini in your fourth, which rules home, property, family, living situation, your emotional foundation. This is bringing another layer to this Jupiter energy because Uranus and Gemini in the fourth can bring sudden changes in the home, family dynamics, living arrangements, property matters. Mars adds movement and urgency and activity and repairs and conflict or motivation around the household. Now, Sedna adds deeper emotional themes involving family history, trust, abandonment, which is the feeling of having to manage everything alone, right? Now, the sextile from Jupiter in the sixth to these fourth house energies suggests that changes in your daily routine may be connected to changes at home. So you may recognize that your schedule around your family needs, what's required of you around the home repairs, caregiving, relocation, or even some sort of new living situation, right? So your schedule needs to be organized around these things. So this can also be very supportive for working from home, creating a healthier home environment or building routines that stabilize your emotional foundation. That could certainly manifest as that. But this Jupiter quincunxing the North Node, retrograded 0 degrees in Pisces in your first house, this is deeply personal. The first house rules identity and body and appearance and your vitality and your confidence and just your personal direction in general. And that North Node in Pisces in your first is pulling you toward becoming more fully yourself, softer, more intuitive, more spiritually aligned, less defined by other people's needs. But Jupiter in the sixth house may be increasing responsibilities and work demands or health routines. So the quincunx is asking you to adjust your daily life so that it supports your identity rather than swallowing it, because that could happen really easily. So you may need to just step back and ask if your routines are helping you become who you're meant to be. Or are they keeping you just locked into duty? I have to do, I have to do. And this transit may require changing your schedule, establishing boundaries, changing your work habits or your health practices so that your body and your spirit can just breathe, at least a little more than it's been, right? Now, the square from Jupiter, excuse me, into Leo, to Chiron in Taurus, Chiron is going to be in Taurus in your third house just for the summer, June, July, August. Then he goes back into Aries. Then he goes back into Taurus next spring, right, for 7 years, right? So we're getting like a little bit of a preview with him. I'm going to do a separate video on the Chiron and Taurus, but this could bring a lot of sensitivity around communication, around learning, around siblings, neighbors, local life, writing, speaking, your nervous system, what else? Old friends. Chiron in the third, we have to be careful that we don't get gaslit by like family members, siblings, extended family, neighbors. We have to be careful there. Just a little heads up. But this could bring up like fears and discomfort around that, right? And the square can also show nervous system tension. Too much work, too many messages, too many responsibilities, or too much mental stimulation may affect your well-being. So the healing comes through slowing down, simplifying communication, and trusting that your voice has value, even when it's quiet, even when it's practical, even when it's not perfect, right? Your voice has value. Now, finally, Jupiter in Leo trining Neptune in Aries in your second house. I like this. This is a beautiful influence for money and values and self-worth and your talents and your spiritual confidence. Neptune in Aries in the second is dissolving old fears around worth and helping you redefine value in a more intuitive, inspired, and spiritually courageous way. Like, because that trine from Jupiter in the sixth can support income through work, service, anything connected to healing, creativity, wellness, spiritual work, or even just your daily skills. Can also help you believe more deeply that your gifts deserve support. And this is especially helpful if you're trying to align work with purpose, where your daily efforts can become a lot more connected to a larger sense of meaning. But Neptune still requires clarity with money. Please don't lose sight of that, not for 1 second. Inspiration is wonderful, but practical budgeting and boundaries and realistic planning still matter. They still matter. And the thing is, with that Neptune in there, it could be a little tricky to remember that, right? So this is where astrology is about, these are what the energies are. You're not a puppet to it. Pay attention and make the right decisions, okay? Now, overall for your energy, Jupiter moving into Leo, this is beginning a year of growth through work and health routines and service and daily structure. So this can absolutely bring more productivity, more employment opportunities for sure, stronger wellness habits too, and just a renewed sense of usefulness, right? But your chart also does ask you to not lose yourself in responsibility, right? You know, because your daily life must become a place where your spirit can thrive. Work, health, home, creativity, communication, self-worth, all asking to be reorganized around a much more honest version of who you're becoming, okay? So that is what I have for you, my Pisces friends, having to do with this Jupiter transit. I hope this was helpful in some way. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.